meeting portion of the Town of Wellfleet Conservation Commission meeting of February the 17th, 2021. This meeting is opened pursuant to Massachusetts General Laws, Chapter 30A, Sections 18 through 25, as amended, the Wetlands Protection Act, the Wellfleet Environmental Protection Bylaw, and its regulations. Additionally, we are operating pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12th, 2020 order regarding the open meeting law and remote meetings and his subsequent orders. Present for the commission are Barbara Brennesel, Michael Fisher, John Kumbler, and Debbie Freeman. So Hillary, I know we have a lot on the agenda in the business meeting, but just to start, if you could mention what we heard in the mail on the cyanobacteria. And I know John Reel is here for the harbor plan, and Barbara has questions about the beach regulations, and we have Horsley Witten here. So how would you like to do it?
I'd like us to take Horsley Witten first, because that's something we've been working on, and they're both here, and we're paying them to be here. So I think we should move ahead with Jeff and Nate. And I did send them our thoughts, comments, and corrections from the previous meeting. So I think we could jump right in, and it doesn't need to take too long. And if it does take too long, then we'll have to move some things around further. So
can I just ask a question?
Yes.
Am I on the agenda as well?
Yes, we'll do jurisdictional opinions at the end of the business meeting, because okay, we technically don't need you present to tackle it.
All right, thank you.
All right, so why don't we go to the draft Wellfleet Environmental Protection Regulations and our comments on them.
Okay, so hello everyone, Nate Kelly again from Horsley Witten, and Jeff, my colleague, is here with me. This is our first review session with you all. So we do a lot of these, but everybody does them a little bit differently. So I don't know, Madam Chair, if you have a specific procedure you had in mind that you wanted to go through on this.
No, I think we made substantive comments based on our working group session. And as I understand, those have been forwarded to you. So if you would like to indicate to us what you thought of our comments going, sequentially through those, I think that's probably the best way to go.
Okay, do I have the power to share?
You should be able to.
So the comments that I received were all under the name of Mr. Fisher.
Yes.
Okay.
That was only because I was a clerk, not because they were all my ideas.
Not because you were so thorough. I guess before I started, all right, first let me see if I can share here. Let's get that done. Okay, so are folks seeing this?
Yes.
All right, so I want to just ask the question. A lot of these edits are, they're editorial in nature. They're about language, word choice, and those sorts of things. I didn't see a lot of questions in here about sort of big things that are missing, or if there was any sort of like major conceptual problems with what we have placed in here. I mean, we covered a lot of ground, and there's a lot of material, I know, for everybody to absorb here and for us to go through. So I'm happy to go through this comment by comment, but if there was any, as we're going through this, if there are any sort of major structural pieces here or missing pieces, then like that's really sort of the best feedback that we can chew through today. The word choice things and that type of stuff is usually pretty straightforward for us to address, and we're happy to do that, and can just sort of march right through.
Well, let me just put it to the commission then. Were there any structural changes that you felt should have been included in the proposed regulations that were not?
I don't know if this is structural, but we wanted to extend the area of the various protection zones.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know, I think that's more than just structural. It's whether we could do that. That's the one off the top of my head without reviewing the whole thing again. That's the only one I could think of right now.
Okay.
Anyone else?
That's what I was going to say, that the areas we wanted to extend.
Right. Essentially, I'm sure you saw it, the do not touch was extended to 100 feet and the protected zone was extended for another 100 feet.
Yes, I did see that. Okay, so let's just charge right in. So this is an example here up front where these are editorial comments and track changes. You notice that we tend to highlight section references. We try to highlight every one as we're doing this. That helps us keep track as we're going through. So once we get to the final stages, we go back through and we check every highlight and just make sure that that stuff is as it's intended to be. Okay, so here's the first comment. So we had taken language, I believe, from the existing regulations here and placed them in this subheading of activities subject to regulation. So this is fairly standard language. And the comment here is, much of what we regulate is building and tree trimming cutting. Should that be specifically mentioned? I don't see why not. I think that's a good observation, and that certainly could be added.
Okay.
And then should we refer to the activity definition below? Is that in the definition section? I think we certainly, we can check that as well. I think these are all spot on, good comments. So we will look at those. Okay. Editorial comments. I'm scrolling down. Lots of highlights for references here. More editorial, capital V on variances. Easy peasy. All right, so here's a question. So this section here is the review and decision on variances are subject to the following. And letter B says the documented history of performance of best management practices that are proposed. And the question is, can this include prior violations by the applicant? I don't see why not. Okay. And then there was just a question mark here on letter D. So letter D says that the review and decision on variance applications are subject to the demonstrated nexus between the proposed activity and the protection of the public interest. So one of your criteria for looking at a variance is that it has to be in the public interest. So maybe a better word is connection here, but that's what we're trying to establish, is that the applicant really has to demonstrate that there's a connection between what's proposed and the public interest. It's not just for their individual benefit.
That's probably a pretty high bar to meet, huh?
Well, I think I think it can be, but there are times when a variance is going to be, for the purposes of making an improvement. So that you have a lot of existing developments within these protection zones that doesn't meet the standards, old stuff. And if somebody's going to make an improvement that has a net benefit environmentally, I think that's what this is trying to get at. Okay. So number 2 here, reading it through, in exercising its discretion, the commission shall require an analysis of reasonable alternatives for the proposed activity which comply with the bylaw and regulations. The applicant shall provide the commission with a written alternatives analysis and any other information the commission requires to make a decision. Failure of the applicant to provide information within a time period specified by the commission may result in a denial for a variance request. I had questions about this too, and I did not flag it. This is in the existing language. And I think maybe you could give me some feedback on how procedurally this works. Are there times when there are deadlines given by the commission to the applicant in the variance process?
We've never really followed a strict variance process.
Mm-hmm.
So folks just apply for the variance. Sometimes it's mentioned, sometimes it even goes without being mentioned directly. So, and usually I would say folks generally don't miss a time period because I think it's always agreed upon. So if they can't get it to us, they ask for a continuance. We've never had like a hard and fast, oh, give this to us in 2 weeks or we will deny the variance. So I'm not sure we need that. Maybe it's within a reasonable time as specified by the commission, but I don't think it's a showstopper.
I think it's good. We really weren't looking into the procedures as much as we were, trying to deal with the resiliency issues.
Yeah.
But procedurally speaking, it is good practice to try to give everybody timelines. It makes things more predictable and just add structure to it. I mean, it sounds like in practice, this really hasn't been a problem.
No, I mean, I would say we just leave it if it's,
Mm-hmm.
It at least gives us the authority to have a time period if we choose to.
Yeah.
All right, so we scrolled into the definitions here. I thought there were some really good comments in here. And we just highlighted in blue where we added a new definition. So that first one has a little edit there that looks good. And so this is one that I think is good for us to get into because we were trying to, excuse me, define a relationship between the terms like armored shoreline, living shoreline, coastal engineering structure, those types of things. Excuse me, sorry. So an armored shoreline, I think we know one when we see one, but in trying to try to define it, we're saying that this is a coastal engineering structure that uses stone, metal, vinyl plates, good, concrete, certainly, or similar hard materials to cover and protect the shoreline from erosion. I think those are all. Should we limit by listing or say any other non-biodegradable materials?
I think that's probably a good addition.
I would want to check on that because I just want to make sure that living shorelines aren't in some cases incorporating some non-biodegradable materials.
Okay.
I'm not sure the answer to that, but I will get an answer.
In some states, they do. I mean, there are revetments and then something on top, which is the living shoreline. So
right, yeah, this sort of combined approach. There's a
right.
structural element.
Right.
Okay. So here's a section where we might have got.
Can I ask a question on this definition?
Certainly.
We say that an armored shoreline is, hard materials to cover and protect the shoreline from erosion. But oftentimes these structures don't actually protect the shoreline from erosion. They want them to, or they want to change the movement of sand. So do we want to just say to cover the shoreline rather than say protect it from erosion?
Or protect a property from erosion, not the shoreline necessarily.
Yeah. But I mean, we've talked about, jetties or groins that don't necessarily protect the shoreline from erosion, but they're designed to interfere with the flow of natural sand. So I just want to know if we can make that more general to cover the things we're concerned about.
Sure, sure. Yeah, it's a little bit more inclusive of those different situations. Okay. All right, so we're going to check our reference here on the buffer zone, which we will do. And this says includes no disturb protection zone language. So having that in the definition, identifying those two subzones, is that what that comment is for?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so here we are with the coastal engineering structure. So this means, but is not limited to, any breakwater, bulkhead, groin, jetty, revetment, seawall. All right, so this is meant to be the umbrella, most inclusive term, you know, back to that other comment. So anything that includes, you know, all of these different approaches is going to be the coastal engineering structure. This should include, not probably, but this should include the armored shoreline as defined above in that list.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, of course.
Do we have the ability to make our definition of coastal engineered structures include some of these biodegradable netting structures, because we see evidence that they continue to accelerate erosion, and some of them as designed function and have the same adverse effects of these other structures? So I'm just asking the question because I don't know.
I mean, I think you do. What we were trying to do, and you know, the jury's out on whether we were completely successful, is just try to make because of course you get down to the section later that deals with, you know, these coastal areas, and we were trying to make sort of a clear distinction between basically what you like and what you don't like.
Yeah, yeah.
The armored shoreline versus the living shoreline. So that was the goal of what we were trying to set out with these definitions.
Okay.
We may not have gotten it exactly right, but we will we'll certainly look at that and try to make sure we've got that distinction, because this is setting that up. So I want to be mindful that any changes that we make in here, we just have to make sure it works with the performance standard.
Yeah. Yep. No, I'm okay. Just asking the question.
Yeah. Question about the comma. So I love this question because we call it the Oxford comma sometimes. In legal documents, best practice is to use it. So if we didn't use it consistently, we'll do a global, but we'll definitely try to do that.
Yeah, my editor insists on it.
I argue with my marketing person all the time on that. Diffraction. So a question here: do you distinguish between seen and unseen, or apparent meaning not real, as an optical illusion?
Yeah, I was just wondering about apparent bending. What does the apparent mean?
I left that in from the existing language. I don't love it either, and I think it could be taken out.
What happens if we remove it? Are we missing anything?
No, I don't think so.
Then let's get rid of it.
Definition for disturbance, I think, is a great idea. Okay, so fill. To deposit any material so as to raise an elevation, either temporarily or permanently, fill materials may include, but are not limited to, sand, gravel, loam, shell, stone, concrete, and pavement. Untreated wood materials used for pilings shall not constitute fill. Why? I think this is because pilings are going to be used for, they could be used for docks or similar structures in the no disturb zone. And that can complicate things because of prohibitions on fill. I think that's why that's there.
Yeah, we have a lot of deck replacements, for example, and if they couldn't support the deck with a piling, then they wouldn't be able to replace a deck or anything along those lines.
I think there's a bunch of situations where a piling could be allowed, but if it were strictly interpreted as fill, then it would become a problem.
And if it's treated, it's different from untreated?
Well, treated, I think the intent of that, again, this is from previous work or previous language. I think the intent there is not to have leachate, right, of the stuff that goes on the treated wood. I mean, I think that's a good technical question, though, now that I'm reflecting on that. We should talk to our contractors just to see how realistic that is. If it is, great. If not, then we should address it. Okay. Isolated wetlands are freshwater or saltwater wetlands of any size. Do we need freshwater? I'll take your guidance on that.
I think we should leave it in.
Okay. The age zones with the plural, there's no reason for that S there, so that we can take that out. Living shoreline, okay, so a type of CES, so it is under the umbrella, that is used to protect coastal banks from erosion through the use of newly installed vegetation, which may or may not be fortified by a subsurface structural element or small-scale above-ground structural features. These are distinct from armored shorelines. All right, so a few questions here. Explain why not included in CES. I think it should be. And then the question mark on planted. So, oh, is that instead of installed? That's probably just the engineers that I work with speaking to me.
But do we mention living shorelines above under the CES definition?
No, we should.
Yeah, I think we should too.
Yep, I agree.
Especially if there are these structural features we weren't sure about how to distinguish this from something that was in other states, in other places, a living shoreline is just basically sand and vegetation. It doesn't contain any other structure that supports this. So I wanted to make sure that we had a distinction there.
Can I ask a question on that one?
Sure.
It's just, I mean, it's pretty clear when you say these are distinct from armored shorelines, you're referring to the vegetation. But I'm worried about the fact that someone could say it refers to the small scale above ground structural features and subsurface structural elements. The reference of
right, because it says it may or may not be fortified by subsurface structural elements. So is there a difference between these and CES? And in my mind, there is.
I think we need to separate the two.
I mean, I think what we were trying to establish is that this is the preferred CES.
Well, it's not, a living shoreline to me is an alternative to a CES, not a preferred CES. And I don't know if anyone else feels like that.
I mean, I'm a little concerned the way Barbara is. And my concern is the may or may not be fortified by substructural elements or small scale above ground structural features. I think if we're talking about living shoreline, we should talk about living shoreline separately. That's my feeling. I don't want to impose on anyone else.
I think we can put a pin in this, and maybe what Horsley Witten can do between today's meeting and the next meeting is we can send you like some summaries of what other people call living shorelines and the different elements and how they're, how they're constructed. Because a lot of these, from our perspective, a lot of these do get engineered. They're engineered structures, even though the result is a sort of vegetated living shoreline. So I think I think we could go either way on that, and let's get into some of the detail. We'll look at some different practices together and talk about what you like and what you don't like, and whether we include a living shoreline as part of a CES, or if we do indeed treat it separately. I think we can work through that together.
That sounds good. I think it needs further discussion.
Yeah, and it'll just, again, it just sort of affects the performance standards later. So we just want to make sure we all get on the same page there.
The next one, we're concerned about the issue of brackish ponds. I want to know if we can just say any open body of water.
Sure. Yep. Simplify that. I think this comment on refraction makes sense. The vessel stuff we honestly didn't really look at. So we can accept any edits that you'd like to put in there.
So you don't know any legal reason why whether there's a motor or not makes a difference?
I mean, I know just because I like to fish that there are restrictions based on motorized versus non-motorized, and the size of engines. I don't know that that's stuff that you all get into.
Well, our goal is not to have whatever it is left on the fragile wetlands, and whether as an engine or not shouldn't make much difference.
And if we say without a motor, well, then people might put a boat with a motor there and think, okay, I'm good.
And why does it matter if it's used in the waterways or not?
Right, it could just be sitting there for years and years. Maybe they're using it as a picnic bench.
So we could just stop at similar watercraft, period, and then we'd be clear.
Right. Now in this section, while you're on ours, I know you have wetland resource under definitions, but there's no definition of what a resource is. And we talk about that a lot at our hearings about the resource. And I wonder if there should be a definition of a resource, or you can just say refer to wetland resource or something like that. But we use the term, we don't use the term wetland resource a lot during our meetings or permitting process. We use the term resource. So I'm just wondering if we should have that defined in some way or refer to wetland resource.
I'll check that to make sure. I'll see if wetland resource is adequate based on that definition. Check that. I apologize if you can hear the chainsaw outside my house right now. Okay, vernal pool indicator species. We don't have these yet. Why include spotted salmon, which we have is not listed? Is there a state list we could use? What about change over time? So I can have our, this we copy from your existing one. I can have our Amy Ball, our scientist, look at this and make this, tailor this to Wellfleet.
I think what we want is a state list, which would presumably change over time, and referring to the state list rather than trying to get all of the possible species.
All right, we'll see. Thanks. I think this is standard language here for wetland resource area. The only reason they include freshwater is because it is in contrast to the marsh. But I don't think that there's a problem with taking that out and making it more inclusive. Okay. So here we are in our site plan requirements. And the names of property owners. So currently the RDA form does not require this. We should reconcile the form and this requirement. NOI should have, but should RDA? Maybe there's a question mark there. Also, E, square footage needs to be required on forms. So is this a question of making all of your checklists consistent? Is that what this is about?
Yes, because we have the forms, the applicant gets the forms, and if it differs from the regulations, then we have difficulties. In particular, the difference between an NOI and an RDA, which is really not made in this at all.
So should that be a housekeeping item for us at the end of this? That we look at all the forms once we think that this is ready to get adopted?
That would be great.
Okay.
Well, I think Hillary wanted to keep the RDA simpler than the NOI. And so maybe working from the forms back to this. At current, it says all applicants RDA, NOI, and so on are all in the same category.
Right, and so we don't require a butter notification for RDAs, but I think this is saying that the site plan should just name the abutting property owners. It's not saying notify the abutters, right?
Right.
So I think that's okay.
Yeah, but there's nothing then requiring NOI people to notify the abutters.
Well, that's in the Wetlands Protection Act.
So it doesn't have to be in ours as well.
Right, correct. Unless we were going to deviate from that, which I don't think we are.
Now, I'm just concerned someone reading this is not necessarily going to check with the state. They're going to just say, oh, I have to do this or I don't have to do that. You could say something about, in accordance with the state regulations, the site plan should include, but not limited to, all of the following if you want. I might just add, and make forms conform, reconciled. Reconcile with this. And on E, what we've been looking for is the total disturbances and also the total disturbances within the protected zone. And this only asked for disturbances as a whole.
So you want it sort of itemized, broken out. Yep.
I have one question. In the procedures, does it make sense to put in there that something about the site visit that the commission makes and projects need to be staked and described on the ground? Just so it's all in one place, because it's in the bylaw, but it's kind of
hidden in the bylaw. You have to read through all of Article 3 before you find it.
Well, that's what I'm saying. I don't think folks read the regulations and then, oh, let me go check the bylaw, make sure I'm doing everything. I wonder if in the procedures we can just have, you know, a section that says site visits will be made by the commission the Wednesday of the meeting. You know, the site is to be marked accordingly, or whatever it needs to say.
And that we have the right to visit the site.
That's it. The bylaw gives us the right to visit the site, but I think the regulations should spell out that the projects need to be marked, flagged, marked.
I know you have other business, so I want to pause. It is 4:42 on my clock. So, Madam Chair, I just want to, pause for a second and give you the chance to, stop us here, or.
Oh gosh.
What do you want to do, Hillary? We have a lot to cover beyond this.
We're happy to come back. So.
Perhaps we can take this out of a meeting and hold another business work meeting posted with the consultants present and give it its own special time.
I think that would probably work the best.
Okay, so why don't I check with Nate and Jeff, see when they're available, and then I can doodle poll the rest of you and we'll find time to continue.
Yes.
Good.
And Nate, Jeff, just so you guys know, it didn't take us more than 2 hours, I don't think, to go through. Was it more than 2 hours? It didn't take it wasn't an all-day affair for us to go through them.
First 3 hours.
3 hours, so.
I think that's outstanding.
Okay, all right. So if you guys can tell me dates and times you're available in the next couple of weeks, and we'll circulate that to the commission and see what we can do.
Absolutely.
Great.
All right, thank you so much.
I think we made good progress here. So
thank you.
Thank you. And I look forward to the next meeting and finishing this up.
Absolutely.
Okay, Hillary, we have the harbor plan, beach regulations, the cyanobacteria letter, and some jurisdictional opinions.
Let's go to John Reel, because we've been putting him off for several meetings. So I think we should hear about the harbor plan.
John.
Thank you. I think you've all, I hope, seen a draft of the harbor plan. We've had some very good comments from Barbara and from John Portnoy. I'm mostly here to answer questions and to listen. The plan has been approved as a draft by the Board of Selectmen. I'm also meeting with the Marine Advisory Board next week. So one thing, if I'd be glad to listen to any questions or comments, or if it helps your time issue, just send them to me and I'll make them part of the record for the next NRAB meeting, which would be sometime in early March.
So John,
how would you like to proceed?
Will we see another version with our comments and the other comments from the other committees and groups reflected in it?
I can do that.
I think that would be the most helpful.
Okay. So you would like to see the most current version
After the comments are incorporated.
after your comments or everyone else's?
I think everyone's.
Everyone's, yeah.
Okay.
Before it goes for final approval, I think.
Absolutely.
Okay. In other words, you like that you would like to make some comments. Other people will make comments. I would incorporate those, and then you'd like another look before it goes back to the Board of Selectmen for final approval.
I think so.
That's fine.
Yeah.
That's fine. Be glad to do that.
Great.
I know that you've received comments from John Portnoy and Barbara Brennesel. If anyone else wants to make comments, Barbara and John circulated theirs to the whole committee and to John Reel. And I would suggest that anyone else do the same.
As I said, my intention is to discuss those with at the next NRAB meeting, so we could be sure that those are public documents, if you wish.
Great. Okay, is there anything else that we need to do then on the harbor?
No, thank you, John, for sharing that with us.
I did just have, in listening to the previous discussion, a quick question. One of the things that we are very concerned about is protecting salt marshes, not only against sea level rise, but wind. And I'm thinking particularly some of the marshes on Lieutenant Island, which is very low lying. And I just, one of the things one of the ideas we floated is some sort of a oyster reef off the shore, which would have two uses. One is benefit the oyster population, but also break up wind. And I couldn't understand from the discussion whether this is the sort of thing, obviously you want to review that, but is this the sort of thing that would be prohibited from the get-go?
I think we would have to look at any proposal, but there's no reason it would be prohibited. I'm confused.
Okay,
No,
that's what I expect.
I think your biggest foe will be the DMF that want it harvested within 3 years.
You know, I'm aware of that, and
yeah.
I'm talking with Nancy about that.
Right.
Okay.
But we've never taken a position where we would oppose something like that.
No,
okay.
Actually, we approve culching, which is essentially
the same thing.
Trying to start oyster reefs. Yeah.
We also approved an oyster reef for the Nature Conservancy, what feels like 1,000,007 years ago.
Is that the Audubon one?
That was with Audubon, yeah.
Yeah.
So I think they are approvable.
So please all have another look at the draft that you have. And if you have any further questions, comments, or suggestions, let me know. We would be delighted to consider them.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you for the time.
Okay.
Jurisdictional opinions, Debbie?
Sure.
Peter McMahon, are you still on? I'm assuming that's Peter McMahon. I could be wrong. Peter?
Yes, I'm here.
Would you like to present your jurisdictional opinion?
Sure. All right. Can you see me?
No.
Well, you're coming into view. You look like, okay, there you go.
Okay. Hi, how are you? All right. So at the Weidlinger House on Valley Road, is on Higgins Pond. There is a telephone pole / power pole at the bottom of the driveway. It's original from 1953, from when the house was built. It was probably put in by Feral Electric, which I believe did all those poles. And it's very spindly. and it is sitting in a wet area, in the wetland. I mean, when we, you know, it looks to me like it's about 10 feet into the wetland. And so it has been sitting in, you know, in mud, and it's rotten. So Farrell came out because it looked very tippy in the last storm, and there's a big transformer on top of it. The power goes then underground and to the house from that pole underground. So Farrell came out, I had Farrell come out to look at it, and the installer said it wouldn't support his weight. So he couldn't climb it. There is a guy wire on it, but it looks bad. I've been worrying about it for a while because you know it's going to fall in the middle of August. So I just thought it would be good to look into replacing it, you know, before that happens.
Where are you going to place the new pole?
I was thinking of putting it where the old one was, but it doesn't need to be. I just need to get, you know, I need to get power, maintain power to the house.
If the pole is compromised now by the wetland, wouldn't you want to put it a little more upland if you could? Move it out of the water?
Yeah, possibly. I mean, it has lasted since 1953. I don't know. I don't know what they used for the, you know, I'm sure it's creosote. I don't know how, right. I don't know what the lifespan of poles are at this point. I mean, it's a very narrow lot there. You can see from that septic plan, there's the driveway, there's the septic tank, the septic system, and then there's the property line, which is, it's not a lot of room there, but it could go further up on the bank by the driveway.
I would prefer an alternative like that, get it out of the wetland.
Could it go underground, under the driveway?
It would be a very long way. The pole up is all the way up the hill. It's gotta be, I don't know, 200 yards or something. It's a long way. Be quite an endeavor to put it underground.
Peter, could you work with Farrell Electric and come back to us with some alternative locations that aren't in the wetland, or some alternative ideas? Because I think that would be ideal, obviously, to remove it from the wetland if we can.
Sure, yes.
Better for you too, I think, in the long haul.
Yeah, I'll talk to Farrell and see what they can come up with.
Yeah. And then our next meeting is March 3rd. So if you could plan to come back on March 3rd, okay, and let us know, we can then move ahead with something.
Also on your plan, if you have alternatives for the placement, if you could mark those on your plan, yes, so we can see what you're talking about.
Yep, no problem.
Great.
All right, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, bye-bye.
Okay, so our next jurisdictional opinion is for 99 Way 60. And they are proposing, I'm just gonna go ahead and share this with you so you can have a look at the application. So bear with me 1 minute here. Okay, so this is for Stephen and Linda Moore, map 19, parcel 13, and they are requesting a professional cutting down of 2 oaks and 3 pine trees due to potential hazard to the house, planting on existing embankment to control erosion and beautify the area. And then here's their list of plants. I think with this, Doug and I would recommend an RDA just to remain consistent, because it is more than 2 trees. And the planting plan is sort of mysterious to us, where they're doing the planting, how many, and what it's going to look like. While we're very supportive of the plants on the list, it would be good to see an actual planting plan. So the choice is yours.
And we need a site visit. So I would say RDA.
Yeah.
It looks like some of the plants aren't native either.
Yeah. What about yucca and rhododendron? Are they native?
Azalea. I mean,
beard.
I think we need to take a look at this place, and we need to take a look at the actual planting plan.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So you want to tell them that we need an RDA on this?
Yes, that would be great. So if you could make a motion.
Okay, could we have a motion to actually move this from a JO to an RDA?
So moved.
And I need
second.
I need a voice vote. Barbara?
Yes.
John Kumbler?
Yes.
Leon? Leon? I can't hear you. I'm sorry.
He's muted. He'll work it out.
Yes.
There we go.
Okay.
My space bar wasn't working.
Mike Fisher?
Yes.
And I don't know if Ben is here. I didn't see him.
No, I haven't seen him yet.
Okay, Debbie Freeman, yes. You're all set. That'll have to be moved to an RDA.
Okay. And next up is from Ethan Esty. He is a shell fisherman out off of Old Wharf Point. And he writes requesting permission to access his grant, which is grant number 891, off of the Old Wharf Point landing. His specific requests are both to drive onto the grant during the months of January, February, and March, to remove, then return all oysters and gear on the grant. And number two, to drive to the land adjacent to the grant, but not onto the grant throughout the rest of the year. He goes on to say, the limiting factor in my farming of this grant is the removal and return of oysters and oyster gear during the winter and early spring months. This is due to two reasons. First, the grant is very high up in the distribution, making multiple boat trips difficult, since the area between the access point and the grant are dry throughout the majority of low tide. Second, the removal of oysters and gear is dependent on the weather, where removing the oysters from the water too early will lead to mortality, and removing them too late will lead to ice to damage the gear. This prevents me from picking a specific date to start the process. Allowing me truck access onto the grant during these months solely for the purpose of gear removal and return eliminates the most costly and dangerous part of the job. Then it goes on to say, number two, unless blocked by another grant, all grants off the Old Wharf Landing are allowed vehicle access either onto the edge of their grant, except for grant 891. This is due to the delineation of what is considered a river. In between my grant and the landing, there is about a foot deep channel, which shifts location throughout the years. While I have successfully driven back and forth throughout previous years, the movement of this stream now prevents me from driving close to the grant. I don't believe this access poses any additional risks to the shellfishing community, since the stream is higher up in the distribution than any and all other shellfish grants in the area. Allowing me vehicle access only to the edge of my grant will allow me to access the grant throughout the tide rather than the narrow window on either end of the tide. I am not asking for my grant deed to be changed to allow vehicular access, only access onto the grant throughout the year. Rather, I am requesting permission to access the grant only for the removal and return of oyster gear in the winter months and to drive to the land adjacent to the grant during the rest of the year. Thank you for your consideration, Ethan. And here's his drawing. So there, here's Lieutenant Island, here's Old Wharf, and this is his grant, and this is the river.
Which is his grant?
Grant 891, this one.
Okay, and who has the grant right above that? Is that Russ Junkins' grant?
I have no idea. I thought I saw Nancy on here.
Because Russ just uses, he parks at the end of Old Wharf and uses a canoe and walks his canoe out there. So I would be a little reluctant to allow this unless we went out there and saw what was happening and see what the neighboring grant holders are doing. This would set a precedent that I'm not really comfortable with at this point. I mean, I really support Ethan. I really like him. I think they need access to their grants, but if the people in the grant next to them have figured out a way to do this, then I'm thinking maybe he could too. And I don't even, well, there's something about this grant that's an issue I have as well, but I'll let other people comment.
Barbara's correct. I think we do need to look at it. I think we need to know, Hillary, also how all the other grants are getting access that would involve crossing that river.
Yeah, and I think we know that the Old Wharf grants access was by boat, right? Foot or boat?
They walk out from Old Wharf Point usually, and my neighbor has a grant right next to Ethan's, and he has a canoe and he drags it across, and I've gone out there with him, and some of the other people come in through Lieutenant Island on Audubon property. So I think we need to be out there and look at this a little more carefully. I don't want to prevent someone from making their living here, but I don't think we do this very casually.
Okay, can we
say something?
Yeah.
Yes, John, and then Nancy.
I want Nancy's input on this before we make any decision.
Right, I don't think we're making a decision.
We're not making a decision, but if we can get Nancy's input too, if they have other ways to access, and even if it's just on either side of the tide, I mean, sometimes you have a grant that's not easily accessed. The people on Egg Island can't get out there except on minus tides. So, I mean, that's their grant and they work around those kind of issues.
Okay, let's hear from Nancy, please.
Well, I was just going to offer, I'm here to answer any questions. If you take a site visit, I would love to go with you so that I can give you a lay of the land and, who's where and how things are. The leases on the leases that the town issues to the grant holders on that Lieutenant Island side, which is the ones that are on the bottom of the little stream river, they have access by foot and boat, I believe only. And I've looked at each and every one of the leases, so I know that's true. And so, yeah, I guess I just would want to, I think it would be good if I was there with you. And I'd also be really interested just to hear your reasoning about stuff as, to educate myself as well.
I think that's a great idea if we do a combined visit with the shellfish warden. Hillary, perhaps you can set that up.
At low tide.
Absolutely. Yeah, especially if we're going to be walking out there.
Wear your waders.
We'll need, depending on the tide. So I'll through Hillary, I'll let you guys know whether you're going to need really tall boots or short boots. So maybe we try and pick more of a negative tide.
Yeah, that would be
you can walk across actually.
Right.
Okay. John, does that answer your question?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely want to hear what Nancy has to say in more detail, and we'll find that out when we go out there.
Okay. If I could, Debbie, through you to the commission, in our eyes, we've talked to Ethan about this, and so we knew that he was going to come to you because he had to do it directly. One thing I will say, when you're talking about getting gear off, that makes us really happy. Ian does have every single rack off of that grant this year. I think it's the first time since I've been here. So, he worked really, really hard to do that. And I appreciate that. But again, I just, I'll look forward to hearing your thoughts on it as well. But when it comes to taking gear off, we applaud that. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Hillary, are there any other JOs? I can't hear you. I'm sorry, you're muted.
Sorry, no, that was all for the jurisdictional opinions. And you had wanted to talk about the cyanobacteria letter. Was that the report that I had sent around?
Yes, that and the beach regulations quickly.
You mean the small vessel regulation?
Yes.
I thought we were going to vote on that today.
Hillary?
I'm going to request that we hold that till the end of the meeting if we could, just because of the time.
Okay. All right, so on the cyanobacteria.
I just wanted to share the report with you. I don't know that it needed much discussion. It's a project, it's in its infancy. The testing results looked good, and we will sample again next summer. So just,
okay. And the town's going to,
I just wanted you to know that it was going on and that the results.
And that town's going to continue to pay for it.
Until it gets removed from my budget, yes, it's important to me. It's important to public health. It's important to wastewater. It's important to you. So
great.
Okay, then we'll close. If I could have a motion to close the business meeting and open the public hearings.
So moved, Michael.
Is there a second?
Barbara?
All right, I need a voice vote. Barbara?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Leon?
Taking a break.
Mike Fisher?
Yes.
Debbie Freeman? Yes. So we're going to move into the the public hearing section of the Town of Wellfleet Conservation Commission meeting of February 17th, 2021, which is again held pursuant to Massachusetts general laws, the Wetlands Protection Act, the Wellfleet Environmental Protection Bylaw and regulations, Governor Baker's order of March 12th, 2020, suspending certain portions of the open meeting law and his subsequent orders. The first matter is the emergency certification for Holland Trustee 1440 Chequesset Neck Road, map 18, parcel 7. This is the NOI to install 3 sand-filled coir envelopes along the toe of the eroding coastal bank. And this was continued, I believe, in order to allow us to proceed with the conditions. Is that your understanding, Mr. Zender?
It is, Madam Chair, and hello, everybody. It's nice to see you all again. And just for the board, and I think you have them already, we had prepared and presented to Hillary a set of proposed conditions for the consideration by the board. So we're here to address any questions about the conditions and hope that you see fit to approve the emergency order. Thank you. I'm sorry, the OOC.
Could you tell me how long it takes to do the sediment analysis?
I can ask Seth to answer that question if you don't mind.
Sure.
Yeah, sure. For the record, Seth Wilkinson Ecological Design. Sediment analysis doesn't usually take more than 2 or 3 weeks, in my experience. I believe Coastal Engineering has done that analysis for us in the past, so they should be able to do it in-house.
And the sediment analysis applies to the sand you're putting on the beach and into the envelopes?
Yes. So essentially, you take a sample of the sand from the beach and the bank, and then you take it from the source. And it was inquired of last time. The source was Dennis and Elizabeth Murphy's pit in Northeastham. Full disclosure, that is my aunt and uncle. So it was close by, and I think very compatible sand to this area. So yeah, we just take the samples and send it to Coastal, and they put it through the sieve analysis, and they'll graph that, and we'll provide that to you.
Hillary, what do you think is an appropriate time frame?
3 weeks from the issuance. I mean, it doesn't take long at all. They just ship it off to the lab and it gets analyzed.
Okay. Is that acceptable, Mr. Zender, 3 weeks?
I would rather, I think it's fine, but I'd rather, if the board doesn't mind, just make it 30 days just to make sure that we can deal with any delays on the end of the lab.
Barbara?
I wanted to talk about one more condition, but
I wasn't ready to leave the conditions.
Okay, all right, fine.
So 30 days, Hillary, is that acceptable?
Yeah, that's fine with me. So what's that, March 17th? I mean, that's rough 30 days, about a month.
That's fine. And then number 4, I don't think we want to use the word temporary. I think we want to use soft solution. And I'm concerned that the monitoring is not specified how often it should be. And I'd like to see inspection really frequently, because I don't want any one storm to come in and demolish something and for the bank to be left with the structure demolished. So I would say monitoring and inspection every 2 weeks. And we can talk about all this after. Let me just finish. And I'm unsure why we wait for all 3 envelopes to have been reduced by 50% in volume. I'm just concerned where the all came from and where the 50% came from. What happens if one envelope is reduced, and why are we using 50%? Is there some basis for that?
I'll let Seth answer that if you don't mind.
Sure, Seth, Mr. Wilkinson, you want to respond to that?
Sure, I'd be happy to. With regard to essentially we're trying to establish a trigger for when the sand nourishment would be replaced. And 50%, so what tends to happen is the lowest envelope deflates first, and then the upper 2 settle down on top of it. If you get a significant storm, it can happen more rapidly than that. But that's a trigger that we've used.
Before you go ahead, what happens when one envelope deflates as far as the resilience of the structure? The overall height, if you sort of think of it as starting off at 9 feet high, and if all 3 of the envelopes deflate equally, then it would be 4.5 feet in total. What typically happens is the bottom would maybe deflate, and then the next highest, and then the third highest. And so all you're doing is you're just losing height as that sand makes its way out of the envelope and onto the beach. So waves are then able to, lower waves are then able to overtop the array. That's essentially what happens there. But does the array function as effectively in that circumstance?
Yes, it still continues to function. It's not as tall, so there will be, the wave does not have to be as high in elevation to travel over it and then remove some sand from the coastal bank. But it continues to work. It continues to work essentially until the envelopes are almost entirely inflated, because they're continuing to release sand and dissipate energy as they release the sand.
Barbara?
This is just like a nitpicky kind of thing with respect to our regulations and any plans that are submitted. And we generally require that we have a calculation about the total alteration of a lot. And there's nothing here about the current footprint of the house and the driveway and the other little parking area. And our regulations in rereading the calculation, it should be the total alteration of the land area within the buffer zone shall be calculated in square feet by summing up the total area of the lot within the buffer zone and resource area that is currently altered or developed, and shall include the area which is proposed to be altered permanently or temporarily. So I'd like to see that on the plan. The square footage of disturbance on this lot, including now this structure, because that's what we're requiring in our regulations. And we usually require that for any permit that we issue.
Mr. Zender, can you supply that?
No. Look, this was an emergency order that came in. The board addressed it. We submitted and went to a hearing on this. We presented information on the emergency order. We had a hearing last time, which the board made requests of what they were looking for, which was conditioning. They haven't asked for this. And frankly, I don't think providing the information is going to change either the ability of the board to review this final order of conditions or to approve it.
I agree. I agree. It won't change, but I'd like to see it on the plan because we require it of every submission.
I understand that, and I'm being very clear here. We're not going to provide that. You know.
Then why can't you provide it after the hearing to Hillary?
Here's why, because you're asking my client to go out and spend money on engineers to do calculations and engineering work that he's going to go out of his pocket for that has no bearing on the approval by this board. This is a temporary.
No, but it's a requirement that we have for every application. Why should your client be treated any differently?
Look, if my client were being treated like any other applicant, this issue would have been raised either in a pre-hearing review or at the last hearing. But at the last minute, you're asking us to go out and, you know, and do additional calculation work that the member herself has said won't have any difference on the approval by the board.
It's just on the plot plan. It can be done with a little. You don't have to resurvey the area. It's just something that can be calculated from the plot plan.
Look, we'll listen to the remainder of the request for conditions, and you know, and if we believe that this is moving in a direction that isn't unduly burdening my client, maybe we can talk about whether or not we'll provide after the fact calculations of disturbance.
Is your quibble that we didn't ask for it when it's there in the regulations to start with?
My quibble is that we
understand.
And there was never a request for this information. It's not information that has a bearing on the approval of this project, either on an emergency basis or now. This is a technocratical request that has no bearing on the approval. So, but it cost my client time and money to go out and do it. You know, it's easy to ask for, but he has to go out and hire somebody to do it, and they have to go out and do it. And so, again, there's a totality of the request that the board's making in connection with this application. If in fact, you know, the remainder of these conditions as approved by this board are not unduly burdensome, I can request of my client that we go out and provide this information. But that's our position at this point in the hearing.
All right. As to the planting plan, when did you suggest that the plants be put in?
Seth, if you don't mind, Mr. Wilkinson, I'd like to have an address that if you don't mind me.
Sure. We would typically try to have those installed by April 15th.
Okay. And do you have any estimate of the number of plants?
I could calculate it. There's a density which was provided, but I just need to.
In the letter, I just didn't know how many plants that actually meant.
I can try to calculate it. I just need the height of the bank. If Nate is on and can help me with that, I can do the calculation relatively easily.
And Madam Chairwoman, just for the date of having the planting done, I think, Ms. Wilkinson, I think you said the end of April.
No, he said April 15th. April
15th is, you know, if that's okay for the board, we would ask that be the date for completing the planting.
Are there other questions about the conditions, Hillary?
I have a question. Well, yeah, I think we want to talk about number 5 and 6 because those were ideas from the commission that we haven't discussed with the commission as a whole or with the applicant. My other thought is, do we want a condition that would allow the applicant, and I'm not sure if number 4 does this or not, to replace the structure in its entirety if it becomes too degraded just to sort of refill? How do you fancy that?
Mr. Wilkinson, what if you get to the point where all 3 have been reduced by 50% in volume, what do you do at that point? You replace the whole thing?
Yes, there's not, sand-filled envelopes are really just, they're not repairable. So there's not any way to sort of refill them. You just replace them. And typically we replace them when they're anywhere between 30 and 50% deflated, 30 to 50% remaining volume. We use the higher number to be conservative here. So yeah, it was referenced, you know, if they can't be refilled, they can only be filled once, essentially. And then the coconut fiber fabric starts to break down too much. So,
so I guess my question is, do you think that number 4 allows for the authorization of them to replace the entire array?
Yes, I would recommend that's how that's interpreted. I'm not sure if that question was to me or the board. Sorry.
I think it's to everyone. I just want to make sure we're all on the same page about what it means. That's all. I just don't want to see us in another, you know, God knows how long say, well, that's not what it meant. I just meant fill it back up with sand. So I just want to make sure we're all clear that it means to completely reassemble the array that's in place.
Yeah, and the point of that that condition that we were working with Hillary on was to try to, you know, establish a clear trigger that we also know works with natural heritage. And it essentially accommodates for, well, what if we have a very stormy next 3 years? What if the rest of this winter we're going to start seeing storms like that nor'easter that we just came through before the last hearing? Then this is a trigger that allows for the nourishment to happen again. As you all can imagine, it's rather complicated to mobilize a conveyor belt and crane all the equipment down onto the beach, and so the most cost-effective way is to wait till it's time to replace and then, you know, conduct a big amount of sand nourishment, again, which is appropriate for the design life of this, and replace the envelopes. I think this is the most effective way to do that and sort of address all the concerns that were raised at the last hearing.
Hillary, does that satisfy you?
Yeah, that satisfies me.
Debbie?
Yes, John.
Yeah, I have a question, and I'm not trying to be picky here, but 3 on the plants, planting, I don't want to see us requiring the owner to plant the bank if the plants are going to wash away. Is there any way we can have some sort of sense of where the plants are going to be planted so that they will be effective in doing what they're supposed to be doing, as opposed to just being a requirement that's not meeting the needs of protecting the bank and just a burden to the owner? Where are these plants going? I'm not trying to make it difficult for them, but I'd like to know where the plants are going so that we don't waste that you know, energy and have people climbing all over the bank, further undermining it, planting plants that are just going to wash away.
Mr. Wilkinson, can you address that?
Certainly. The specification that we provided noted that they would go from the top of the array to the top of the bank, in the, you know, only above the envelopes, and that is with that concern in mind. We're not proposing to plant them on the sand nourishment on the face of the envelopes, because I would agree with Commissioner Kumbler that would be, it's likely that the sand will move before those beach grass plantings could root in, and so it's really just the area above, which we do believe will be stable long enough for those to root in.
I should have asked at the beginning, Mr. Wilkinson, at this point, is it working? Is the structure providing the services that you thought it would?
Yes. It's the envelopes continue to be in good shape. We never know how long the sand nourishment is going to last. It was an appropriate volume was placed there, and we got a intense storm. So the envelopes are supposed to last longer than the sand nourishment. That was the reason why we moved in this direction under the emergency provision.
And you said 2.5 to 3 years?
That's the design life of this intervention.
Okay. Hillary, do you have other comments?
I just would like us to go back and have a look at those other conditions, which I will pull back up because I know they were important to some of the commissioners. Let's see here. So number 5, we spent a great deal of time talking about at our last meeting, was the survey of the beach and the coastal bank. So I didn't know if the applicants had given that any thought and would be agreeable to provide that after probably the beach nourishment is placed, I imagine.
Yeah, Madam Chairwoman.
Go ahead, Mr. Zender.
Thank you. I've talked about this with my client. They really don't want to do survey work. They're certainly willing to agree not to undertake any further actions on the bank that Hillary's outlined on section 6, but they don't feel that surveying the beach is going to provide any useful information to either the commissioner or to themselves. I think what's more important to them is that the structure and the bank themselves are stable and protected.
Well, I think the idea was to find out where the sand was going and whether it was appropriate or not.
I understand that.
Okay, Hillary, as far as the monitoring in number 4, is there a time period traditional for monitoring?
Well, you were suggesting every 2 weeks. I think monitoring can be as, simple as walking out and having a look. If there's a camera on it, it could be monitored that way. So there are different ways to monitor if the envelopes are filled with sand or not. It doesn't have to be a technical, 7-point inspection. So I think whatever frequency the commission is interested in, we could say after large northwest storms and monthly, or, every 2 weeks. I mean, if someone's walking by, they can have a look. So it's entirely up to you. I think monthly might be more reasonable.
Madam Chair?
Sure, go ahead.
Look, the homeowners are going to be monitoring this on an ongoing basis to make sure that that the solution is functioning properly, that the house isn't at risk. So I think what Hillary suggested in terms of maybe a monthly monthly monitoring by the applicant, as well as after Seth has suggested any storms of sustained winds of 50 miles an hour or more out of the northwest. I mean, or after significant storm events, if the board wants, we could certainly have somebody take a look at it.
What does the board think?
I think that's reasonable. I don't think people have to be out there every week or every 2 weeks. They're enough. I think you can get enough information on a monthly basis and after major storms.
I concur.
Debbie?
Yes, John.
I actually don't think we need to have it monitored. I think the homeowner has an interest in having it monitored, and will monitor it because the sand fill envelopes are protecting the homeowner's house. My bigger concern in number 4 is what happens if the homeowner wants to, if the envelopes have been reduced and the homeowner wants to replace them, and it turns out that there's significant end scouring because of these envelopes, what remedy does the commission have to prevent just the envelopes being replaced and the scouring getting worse, which affects the neighbor's property? That's a concern I have. I don't think we have to be concerned about the monitoring. I think the homeowner is concerned about that.
Well, under the condition, it says the applicant shall regularly monitor. So it is something that the applicant is agreeing to do.
And the monitoring is important to us. We need to make sure the monitoring gets done. I don't think that's negotiable. It's important to the homeowner and it's important to us.
Yeah, I think in 4, the wills should be replaced by shall. Applicant shall regularly monitor and shall notify the commission.
All right, explain to me why it's in our interest. I just don't see it.
Because God forbid they don't monitor and the structure and the core envelopes fail and the whole helical piling system falls onto the beach and folks could get really hurt. So it's incumbent upon both of us to require this.
Okay, are there other comments on the conditions?
Do we want to have a look at number 6? Because this was important to one commission member as well. The applicant will not undertake any action that would weaken the bank, including drilling anchors or inserting posts without the permission of the commission.
That seems reasonable.
Mr. Zender, are you still there?
I think, Madam Chair, I think the idea of it is fine. I would like to have the language just say the applicant will undertake no activity with regard to the bank without advising the conservation agent whether any permitting is required by the Conservation Commission, meaning it's a little broad, you know, any action that would weaken the bank. I don't know what that means. So I think that if the applicant wants to do anything out there of any type, you know, I think what they should have to do is notify the conservation agent as to whether or not it requires an RDA or a notice of intent. So I don't think the applicant's allowed to go out there and do anything other than what this emergency order authorizes them to do anyways. But I don't want somebody looking at this and saying, well, you know, the kids were playing Frisbee and somebody jumped over the edge and therefore you violated your order of conditions. So I don't think that's going to happen, but I would just like to be a little more technical than the way it's drafted.
Are you going to call me when the big game of Frisbee occurs though?
If I know about it. I would just like it to be that if the applicants would undertake any activity out there that requires review by this commission, that it come before this commission for review. But the standard of undertaking any activity that would weaken the bank kind of puts a subjective standard into that language that I'm not sure how we would look at that later. Yeah, I think Hillary's already banging away at it. I think she understands, you know, any activity that requires approval under either the Wetlands Protection Act or the local bylaw, you know.
That covers it, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think it does. I think it says that, look, the applicant can't go out there and undertake any activity under the bylaw or the act without, you know, a review by, you know, the conservation agent and, if necessary, this commission, and just like you do with everything else. So I'm not sure it needs to be said. I don't think you're allowed to anyways, but I think the idea of the condition is a good one.
Does that meet everybody's concerns?
I think it covers what someone else was concerned about in the previous statement, yes.
Okay.
Okay, and then we just need to go back to number 5 on the beach survey and elevation. I think the purpose of this, if I'm understanding it correctly, was perhaps when we were doing the larger amounts of beach nourishment to see how the beach elevation was changing and how frequently. But looking at what we're looking at, I'm not sure what I would recommend short of, you know, an annual survey just to sort of see what's going on out there.
I think that may have been suggested as a way to maybe modify the renourishment standard, maybe less renourishment or more renourishment. I think, I don't remember who proposed that, but I think that was why that was put in there, to see if there was any potential to modify the 630 yards or whatever is required over time. Maybe less if it's, you know, that I forget who suggested that, but I think that was why.
Debbie, it looks like we have a hand up from a Dylan Sanders.
Okay, I'm sorry, I cannot see that. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. My name is Dylan Sanders, and I represent Sim Weller, the owner of the property immediately north So he has a concern with this condition number 5 or a related condition that should be there. A survey, in his view, should be done really to, and I think this spoke to Commissioner Kumler's concern earlier, to monitor any potential adverse effects that the Coyer rolls will have on adjacent coastal beaches and coastal banks. So for example, any adverse impacts should be surveyed regularly. It should not just include the property bounds, but the impacts on adjacent coastal resource areas.
Okay. How far would the survey extend that you're positing? Would it extend?
I would leave that to the experts, but it would be a visual survey that could be done from the beach to account for any scouring, which several experts have opined might be, is a potential significant adverse impact.
Ms. Civetta?
Thanks. And I think I might have made a suggestion at the last hearing as well about monitoring, just because of my concern of what's going to happen to all the sand with relation to the shellfish resources that are on the flats in front and the eelgrass beds that have been mapped out in front there too. So I know that I had provided that feedback, and I still am interested in knowing that, so that, like somebody, I think Debbie was saying, you know, if we can decrease the amount of sand because it's doing its job and it would have less of an impact, that would be better. I just, you know, I've had feedback about changing shoreline out, not shoreline, but changing flats out there where people look for sea clams and stuff.
Mr. Zender, if it's an annual requirement, a survey, which is both a visual survey and it sounds like a survey of where the sand is traveling.
Yeah, if I may, Madam Chair. Look, I think there's a general interest in where the sand that's on this facing coastal bank or on this beach is going, if it's going anywhere. I'm sure it's going somewhere. I think that's a general problem. I think that's an issue that involves the entirety of this area. You know, if the abutter is concerned about end scour damaging their property, they certainly have a private right in that regard. But my clients are not willing to undertake, you know, general surveys of the whole area just so that everybody can understand what the dynamics are out there. And I'm not sure it's possible to look strictly at this property and identify where that sand is going. My guess is that it's you know, during storm events, and Seth can speak to this better than I can, but I'm guessing during storm events, you know, wave action and wind action is removing sand from this coastal bank and it's moving it up and down the beach. I think that's a fairly large order of survey to understand that. So, and we're just not willing to be the person that foots the bill for that. So,
Mr. Wilkinson?
If it's helpful, just for perspective, through prior filings, an erosion rate has been accepted here. And so it's approximately five feet a year is the short-term erosion rate. So if you were to take this 250-foot length of shoreline and calculate that times the 40-foot height of this coastal bank, then this bank, when it was eroding, was producing about 1,500 cubic yards of sand into the system as it was. So we're not proposing to put even as much sand as this was on average putting out into this area. So as I said before, it's you know, you do have to take into account the level of erosion and the sediment transport in this area in sort of considering these things. The other thing I would note is that we have held the array back 15 feet from the northern property boundary, which I believe is more than enough to prevent any end scour from encroaching beyond the subject property. The other thing I would say,
isn't that required by our regulations?
I'm sorry?
I think that's required by our regulations.
For soft interventions, or for that's usually for coastal engineering structures.
Okay.
But the point, and this is a soft. The other thing is a visual observations, photographs, things are very misleading in these instances. You really do need to do a very detailed survey, and all you're going to see is patterns in the area, which may or may not be due to the intervention. For example, where sand accumulates often has to do with larger coastal processes. My point is, this is pretty complicated stuff, and when you're basically just proposing to put bags of sand temporarily into an area and let the sand meter out through them, you know, I have very rarely seen beach profiles required for these sort of short-term soft interventions. If that perspective is helpful.
Hillary, do we have a way to get a beach profile done at this location that would cover a larger area so that we could see what's happening with the sand?
Probably not, because it would require access onto private property, which we don't currently have for that reason. Again, I think we want to know where the sand is going, but I think it's going to be difficult through the survey to identify that. So I'm struggling to understand the relevance of this condition. I know when we were just dumping, you know, large amounts of sand, I wanted to see whether it was, you know, enhancing the beach and protecting the structure. But now that we have this structure in, we generally require the surveying to see if the beach elevation has dropped. And if the beach elevation has dropped, then it's a signal to require the nourishment. So here we know that we want to keep these things covered with sand. It's sort of a different condition for a different type of project. And I'm struggling to come up with the reasoning and the purpose, short of wanting to understand what that beach elevation is doing, but I'm not sure how that would be useful information to us for the application that's in front of us.
Okay.
Well, Hillary, don't we, when we have a CES, require those beach elevations to be taken regularly, and doesn't that trigger a certain amount of sand renourishment?
So on some properties, we have that as a condition. They survey the beach instead of just placing the sand. And if the beach elevation drops, then they place the sand. But here we have these this array that's filled with sand, and the sand is just going to come out and feed the beach. And when it gets down to 50%, they're going to refill it. So we have a trigger point already established in our condition set. So, I mean, I understand we want to know if the sand is going out and perhaps smothering a shellfish bed. But again, it's going to be, as much as I hate to say it, it's going to be awfully difficult for us to prove that the sand is coming from this location and smothering the shellfish bed, because we're never going to be able to get that specific, and a survey is never going to tell us that particular information, that the sand is coming from this property. So, especially because the grain sizes are matching the natural sediment in the bank. So it's difficult to get from point A to point B. I'm struggling to find the right reasoning for the elevation survey, short of it being interesting data.
Yeah, and I would never propose that they do a sediment transport study or anything like that. I was just, someone brought up the beach elevation as just a trigger for renourishment. And since there is renourishment as part of this condition, those two seem to go together in my mind.
It seems then perhaps we don't need that condition.
I put it up there for debate and discussion. not attached to anything.
All right, so at this point, if we strike that one, the only issue that's remaining is the total disturbed area, Mr. Zender, which we would like you to supply to us as part of the regulatory compliance.
So are you, Madam Chair, through you, are you at, what exactly is the board asking for? Just the total disturbed area before the temporary solution is installed versus after it's installed?
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're happy to provide that after the fact to the board.
I mean, we do that to every single conditions, all the orders of conditions for every project that's an NOI. So we're not, signaling this out. It's just everyone. We've started doing that in the last couple of years.
We understand, and with this slate of conditions, the board has approved, or hopefully will approve, with no additional conditions. We're happy to do that. Madam Chair, I have one further thing, if you don't mind. I have to drop off. I have to drop off because I have a conflicting hearing in Truro to move to on this.
We have a problem then because the next matter is your matter.
No, I understand that. Mr. Wilkinson will be on to monitor the hearing of the next matter. We do not intend to present any information at the hearing. So Mr. Wilkinson will stay and he'll monitor what the board is doing and be here as a representative of the applicant. But I won't be staying on to make comments or address questions, and neither will Mr. Wilkinson. And I want to thank you all for spending your time on this tonight.
Okay.
Debbie, I'm still not comfortable with allowing them to replace the cores without coming back to us in case there is problems with scouring and disruption of neighborhood properties. I don't like the fact we've given them an open-ended replace as they will. I think they have to come back to us.
John, you understand that if there is scouring on either end, those property owners can come in for an enforcement action and to raise a complaint.
I think it's our job to set as a condition that they don't get to replace all those without coming back to us. That's my feeling about that.
Isn't that covered in the, I don't see the conditions there, but isn't that covered in one of the conditions?
No, the conditions specifically say they can continuously replace the cores without coming back to us. I just don't feel comfortable with that open-ended process.
They have to notify us. That's what the condition number 4 says.
Debbie,
yes,
I also think it's not in the applicant's interest to allow end scour on this structure. So if there's end scour, they're compromising their own structure and they're not going to replace it and leave the end scour. That's not sensible. So I guess we can all debate what's sensible and what's not sensible, but that's going to, again, put their structure in jeopardy. And that's my fear and my worry is that if they don't have this authorization, we could be dilly-dallying around trying to get a hearing, waiting for an emergency certification, and the helical anchor system is going to fail. So I would rather give them permission to replace this when they see it dwindling down to the 50%, knowing that this is the best solution we can get at this location, and it's going to work if we maintain it. So for me, it's all about the maintenance and preventing the structure from falling, knowing that end scour is not good for the abutters, it's not good for the property owner, and it's not good for us. So
Hillary, could you put those conditions up once again?
Yes, of course.
Yes, we're covered.
Raised by Mr. Sanders. Do you want to go ahead?
Yes, I think this speaks to the issue of why there should be regular monitoring, at least in the initial phases. We have introduced a new structure to this ecosystem. To be clear, Mr. Weller and we all hope it succeeds. And I'm happy to hear from Mr. Wilkinson that it has succeeded so far. We want it to succeed, but success includes not having an adverse impact on neighboring properties. And so I don't think it's too much of a burden to place on the applicant who's introducing this new structure into this dynamic ecosystem to regularly monitor for adverse impacts on adjacent properties.
I was going to speak to a different thing. I was wondering if number 5 covers John Kumbler's concern that no action be undertaken without approval. And refilling those bags would have to be, it's an action that's being undertaken that would need our approval, wouldn't it?
It would appear so. Hillary?
I would suggest no, because if you look at the condition above it, it says that they shall notify the commission and then they will repair and replace. So I think we're splitting hairs here. I think, you know, the structure is the 15 feet back on either side. And if it is being monitored regularly, which we have described, we're gonna see the end scour. And again, the end scour is gonna start on the applicant's property. The applicant does not want the end scour because that's gonna compromise the integrity of the array that's in place. And that is not what anyone is interested in doing. So we want to keep the structure at the top of the bank, and we need to monitor to make sure that that is the case. So I think, as I understand it, that condition covers this end scour issue with this soft solution.
Okay. I think at this point, I'm going to ask for a motion to approve the conditions as displayed. Could I have a motion?
So moved, Michael Fisher.
Is there a second?
Leon seconds.
I need a voice vote. Mike?
Yes.
Barbara?
Yes.
Leon?
Yes.
John Kumbler?
No.
And Debbie, yes. Okay, that's all set.
Thank you very much.
Hillary, do we need to sign a form for this?
Yes, the standard old order of conditions.
Okay, the next matter is, again, Halleck Holland, trustee 1440 Chequesset Neck Road, map 18, parcel 7. The Wellfleet Conservation Commission will hold a remand hearing on the notice of intent filed by James Halleck Holland, trustee, in parentheses, Blash, close parentheses, for shore protection consisting of construction and installation of a 241-foot long rock revetment fiber roll hybrid structure and planted sand cover and 928 cubic yards of compensatory sand nourishment on a coastal bank, coastal dune, and coastal beach on the property located at 1440 Chequesset Neck Road, map 18, parcel 7. This is a remand hearing as ordered by the Barnstable County Superior Court on December 30th, 2020 in the matter of James Halleck Holland, trustee of the Family Trust et al. Versus the Town of Wellfleet Conservation Commission, Superior Court, civil docket number 1972 CV 00053. And before we start, I need to inform all of the following. The commission has been ordered by the court to review the proposal as if the structure were a pre-1978 structure pursuant to section 203, parens 4, parens A, parens 2 of the Wellfleet Environmental Protection Bylaw, which authorizes the commission to allow a CES provided certain requirements are met. In so doing, the commission is to consider the alternatives analysis in light of whether the plaintiff met the requirement to show it is reasonably likely that there is no feasible alternative methods, that there are no feasible alternative methods of protecting the building other than the proposed CES. Finally, the commission reserves all rights of appeal, including but not limited to any appeal already asserted, which includes the issue of the pre or post 1978 structure. So given that, I'm going to open the hearing on the remand. With that, we have 2 letters, Hillary, that we've received, which need to be included in the record. One is an email from Commissioner John Portnoy, who is not able to be present. And that was on February 7th, 2021. Should I read that into the record, or do you want to?
It doesn't matter. I can read it since you've done a lot of talking. I can.
Great.
Okay, here we go. Dear commissioners, please read this into the record of the next hearing of the Holand Trust application for a coastal engineering structure at 1440 Chequesset Neck Road. I will be away and cannot attend. The existing house on this lot is a complete reconstruction built only 9 or 10 years ago. At that point in time, it was clear that the house site was on a highly dynamic coast and rapidly retreating coastal bank. This section of the bay shore is regularly attacked by northwesterly storms and waves forming over a fetch of 50 miles. This has not been the condition for hundreds of years. Nevertheless, and in spite of common knowledge of accelerating sea level rise, the very large structure was built near the top of the lot, apparently to obtain the commanding view of Cape Cod Bay. Now that the inevitable is happening and the structure is in danger of falling over the bank, the Wellfleet Conservation Commission is being asked to compromise the many public resources associated with an otherwise undisturbed strand of coastal banks, dunes, and beaches to preserve this recently constructed private structure. I think it's highly relevant that the proposed hard coastal structure would be the only impediment to a natural coastal processes from Jeremy Point to Pamet Harbor, a disturbance of 8 miles, undisturbed shorelines of this extent. Second only to the 40-mile back shore of the Cape, are extremely rare throughout the nation and even the world. Further, the Gut, Griffin Island, and Great Island are within a national park, lands held in trust by the U.S. government for the enjoyment of all citizens. The proposed hard structure will permanently public values and public access associated with national seashore resources appreciated by thousands of people every year. It's important to appreciate that over the long term, even with beach nourishment seaward of a coastal engineering structure, legally mandated public access to the beach will be lost for much, if not all, of the tidal cycle. This is because with sea level rise added, sand will be applied farther and farther seaward of the naturally retreating coastal bank on either side of the structure. This artificial beach, so far out of equilibrium with current and rising sea level, will be quickly eroded, eliminating high tide beach access. Also, with sea level rise, a revetment will protrude more and more into Cape Cod Bay relative to retreating banks on either side, increasingly interrupting shoreline sand transport to town, Cape Cod National Seashore, and private beaches and wildlife habitats well beyond the subject property. In the 1980s, the town of Wellfleet made the very difficult decision to remove a hard coastal structure and eliminate a very popular parking lot overlooking the bay just south of the Holand Trust property. The town took this action all those 40 years ago because of the very same natural resource concerns that the commission has for the currently proposed revetment. I therefore urge the commission to continue to deny any hard structure that prohibits coastal bank retreat at 1440 Chequesset Neck Road. Alternatives that allow natural bank retreat, including replacing the existing structure with a smaller one farther to the east, should be thoroughly considered. This would allow the property owners to continue to enjoy their private use of this beautiful setting while preserving and sharing the outstanding natural resource of the area with the local and visiting public. John Portnoy.
Also, I received today by email, as did all the commissioners and the conservation agent, a letter from Sugarman, Rogers, Barshak, and Cohen PC from Mr. C. Dillon Sanders, which is some 8 pages, I believe. excuse me, 9 pages. Do we need to read that into the record, Ms. Quessel?
You do not, Madam Chairwoman. It is part of the record, and it is available as a public record.
Okay.
You could, I'm sure you could ask Attorney Sanders if he wanted to summarize it at some point in this hearing.
All right. Attorney Sanders, would that be acceptable to you?
Yes, it is.
Okay, thanks. All right, then. It seems that our first order of business then is to consider the alternatives analysis. I see that Brian Karlstrom has his hand up. Would you like to speak, Mr. Karlstrom?
Yeah, getting off mute and everything here. Sorry about that. I did want to offer, for the record, pretty firmly the position of the Seashore with regard to this proposal. If I may so do now, I think it might help inform some of the rest of the conversation.
Go ahead.
So the property at 1440 Chequesset Neck Road is located at a critical location within the Cape Cod National Seashore and Wellfleet Harbor area that includes important areas of critical environmental concern, coastal resources and habitats, outstanding resource waters, and valuable commercial and recreational shellfish operations. We do not believe the revetment application materials have presented a thorough investigation and analysis of potential impacts on adjacent lands and waters that would be sufficient to permit a project with such significant major impacts to the National Seashore and town of Wellfleet under the Massachusetts Wetlands Protection Act. We have previously raised 8 points of concern in our letter of December 3rd, 2018, which remain unaddressed by this proposal. Among other concerns, in particular, we note that the engineering and restoration drawings are inadequate to properly evaluate the impact of the proposal and oversimplify the extent of construction, and that the discussion of project impacts does not adequately address the concerns of end scour and other impacts on the Gut and Great Island, as well as along North Cape Cod Bay. We have previously provided technical reports by both National Park Service and consultant experts in coastal geology, coastal adaptation, and coastal structural engineering, and request that those reports be formally made a part of the record on this matter. As we have previously noted, we believe the applicant's need for a solution to the natural coastal bank erosion is directly attributable to the architectural engineering of the house piling foundation, which design is uniquely high risk and apparently inadvisable in this type of vulnerable coastal bank location. We believe invasive actions, such as the proposal, which serve only to mitigate the consequences of a flawed and efficient design while impacting a sensitive seashore environment, should not be the driver for longer-term alternative solutions. Rather, we continue to believe that such solutions, such as retreat to a new house location or perpetuation of the core that has been installed as an emergency action, should be implemented. It is widely practiced along Cape Cod, particularly given this is such an important and prominent location within the national park area. We urge you to uphold the denial of the permit. Thank you very much for allowing us to submit this for the record.
Awesome. If I could hear from the commissioners on the issues involving the alternatives analysis.
Yes, Debbie, may I speak?
Yes, please.
So I'm looking at the original application, which I understand we're supposed to be considering, dated 9/11/2018. And in section F, alternatives analysis, it does not include the COIR envelopes that are clearly an alternative since they can be renewed. So I don't believe that the alternatives analysis was by any means complete.
Okay. And you would argue that there is a feasible alternative because of the COIR envelopes?
Yes, which we understand from Mr. Wilkinson can be in fact restored or repeated and would continue to function. even if they have to be replaced over years.
Okay, and they would extend, he has spoken of a life of approximately 2.5 to 3 years for the coir envelopes.
And if they were replaced, that would be another 2.5, 3 years.
Okay, I would ask that the entire proceeding from the emergency certification through the NOI for the emergency certification be made part of this record so that we can understand all of the issues involved with the coir envelopes and their use and their success and their supposed continued success for the next period of time, which is specified to be 2.5 to 3 years. Mr. Kumbler?
Yeah, if we just take on face value that their armored structure will not create excessive end scouring, which I think is a problematic assumption. But if we accept that and we look at the fact that we do have natural retreat of the coastal bank, the armoring of this structure is not a permanent solution at all, because the bank will erode around the side of the structure. Eventually the structure will be an island in the middle of the ocean, which is not a feasible alternative. It seems to me that by not considering seriously the alternative of moving the house or building a smaller house further back, what they've done is they've given us as their only feasible solution, something that's not feasible, that makes no sense logically. There's no long-term solution that they're offering us because of the natural erosion of the bank, and with sea level rise and increased storms, we should assume an acceleration of that, so that what we will see eventually is they'll have to armor the whole thing and it'll be just an armored island in the middle of the water. This is an absurd position for them to take, looking at what's happening to that bank. I think moving the house is the only logical solution to this problem, and it's not an unacceptable alternative.
Okay, I saw Barbara's hand and Leon's hand. Barbara?
Yes, I just want to backtrack a little bit in talking about this alternative analysis. And once again, I want to read from our regulations under alternative analysis. And it says that the applicant may be required to demonstrate that a non-structural solution has been tried at the site and has failed to provide adequate protection from storm damage to the building. The commission shall require detailed maintenance records to show that the system was properly maintained. So I sort of agree with John Kumbler that long-term, this house should probably be moved if the owners want to enjoy the property. But in the short term, given that we already have an alternative structure in place, I think that we should require, and we did require, that this be monitored and see what happens.
Right, and the structure has been in place now for how long, Hillary?
Since November, December timeframe?
Yeah, couple months easy.
And it is functioning and protecting the bank. And we've been told that the structure will continue and should continue to function. So I would agree with you, Barbara, that that portion of the alternatives analysis indicates that there is another solution.
Or at least one that has to be looked at and tried, and not just up on.
Rejected out of hand.
Right.
All right. Are there other commissioners with comments? Because I do see comments from the audience and we'll get those. Leon?
I just wanted to say that, you know, when we talk about a 2 or 3 year lifespan, it'll be sticking out a good 6 or 7 feet at that point. I mean, the cliffs will have withdrawn 7 feet or more. And so it's already going to start looking like a groin rather than a CES.
Are there other comments from the commissioners? All right, I'll call on Helen Miranda Wilson.
Thank you. I'm here not as a delegate of the Wellfleet Select Board, but an individual at my sole discretion. Why is there an echo? Okay, you're not hearing an echo?
We are, sort of.
Okay, sorry. I have a technical question, probably through you, Debbie, to Hillary. Exactly almost 2 years ago, February 19th, 2019, the then Select Board, which I was on then too, sent a letter that we hoped would be put into the record about this case. And we have not drafted another letter or sent one since then, but the conditions, in my opinion, remain. Is that letter, given that it's dated, but still pertinent, allowed to be included in the record now, again?
I don't see why it would not. Your letter was late in the first instance and it couldn't be included, but I see no reason why it couldn't be included now.
Do we have—
Given that it's, I can resend it. I just looked it up.
Can you read it now into the record?
Certainly. And remember, I'm doing this on my own initiative, and it can be allowed or not. Can you hear me? Yes, you can. Okay, sorry, it's on the other computer. Okay, it's addressed to Mr. Gilmore in the Massachusetts Department of Environmental Protection. And once again, it was sent on February 19th, 2019 from the Wellfleet Select Board. Dear Mr. Gilmore, we fully support the Wellfleet Conservation Commission's denial of the December 2018 application from the owners of 1440 Chequasit Neck Road in Wellfleet to construct a revetment to stabilize the eroding coastal bank on their property. The commission has done due diligence in reviewing the applicant's request. As abutters, we are concerned by the possible consequences from the predictable changes supported by science, of which we are aware, which would result from coastal armoring of any sort along that stretch of coastline. As the Shellfish Regulatory Board for the town, we are particularly concerned that armoring along the stretch will affect the dynamic movement of sand that serves to maintain the low barrier dune known as the Gut to the south of this property, which protects the inner harbor and the town's prized shellfish habitat from an overwash. In addition, the town landing, which is located adjacent to the proposed revetment, would be subject to the increased uneven erosion that occurs over time next to more solid elements. The applicants built in a vulnerable spot at their own risk, knowing that the existing dynamic of wave action scouring the shore, the increase in extreme weather events due to climate change, and the rising sea level would sooner or later result in undermining the vulnerable site on which they chose to build. Since 2013, the Conservation Commission, I'm almost done, has left the applicant more than halfway by allowing 5,972 cubic yards of sand to be deposited 3 North feet below the house in an attempt to prevent the ocean from doing its work. This has been constantly eroded away, and so has been added to the environment along that shoreline with unknown effects on the eelgrass beds and state-mapped sea clam habitat just offshore and within the Conservation Commission's area of jurisdiction. Under these circumstances, it would seem that a managed retreat would be the best option for saving the structure, which arguably should never have been built there at all. Sincerely, and then the signatures of the select board. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Wilson. I see Lauren McKeon has her hand up. Ms. McKeon.
Debbie, thank you, commissioners. I wanted to just add similar to Helen's intent. We wanted to round out our correspondences to the Conservation Commission. In looking at our records, we had last sent you a letter in December of 2018. We copied Hillary on letters to Mass DEP and the MIPA office. Today, we sent those along to you, all three of those letters. We also sent along 2 professional technical reports that we had that were provided to us regarding this project. And those are the ones that Ryan referred to that we'd really like to see fully reviewed and understood as part of this analysis process. So thank you very much. Just wanted to round out the record.
Okay, have those technical reports been provided previously?
They were provided as attachments to the MIPA letter and the Mass DEP letter, which is why we felt we needed to formally submit them to you, the Wellfleet Conservation Commission.
Okay, and were the reports available at the time of the prior hearings in this matter?
They not December 2018. They were done in 2019 when it went to the state process.
Okay, so has I guess what my question is has the applicant had the opportunity to review the reports and to comment on them?
They were provided with copies, or their attorney was provided with copies.
Can you tell me when, Lauren, please?
I can double check that. I'd have to look up at my email, so maybe I'll go mute for a minute and then ask and even take myself off screen while I search my emails, okay. if that's acceptable.
Absolutely fine.
Okay, thank you.
Madam Chair.
Yes, Ms. Quessel.
If I may, the December 3rd, 2018. Oh, thank you.
You've frozen. Ms. Quessel, we can't hear you. Ms. Quessel, we couldn't hear whatever you said.
Sorry, I'm having issues with my internet, I think. Is it okay?
Yes.
Okay, so it's Mr. Carlson's letter from that he referenced in his recent testimony tonight is in the record. It's at page 260, and that lists the 8 issues that he mentioned.
Okay, and the reports that he cited, were those in the prior record?
Those I don't know. I don't have the exact dates of those that he cited, so I wouldn't be able to check.
I can provide the dates. There's a report from Childs Engineering Corporation, June 6th, 2019.
So that would not be in the record.
Okay. There's a letter from Rebecca Beavers, PhD, dated June 11th, 2019.
No, that would not be in the record. Nothing nothing in 2019.
Okay.
So those should now be included as part of the hearing record.
That's up to the commission at this point. The focus of this remand hearing tonight is this was an order from the Barnstable Superior Court. The commission has been given 2 charges, I would say. The first one is that the commission has to consider the structure pre-1978. And the second is that the commission has to consider the alternatives analysis and if there is a feasible alternative.
Okay. Mr. Sanders? I'm sorry, we can't hear you.
Not to disagree with Attorney Quessel and I wouldn't, but is not also it within the ambit of the remand order to specify, to name with specificity any information that the commission lacks in order to evaluate this proposal. And this, including these things in the administrative record, would seem to me to fall within that ambit. That's all.
I would agree. I would agree with Attorney Sanders. That is part of the remand.
Yes, and I think that the reports assist us in making our decision. Mm-hmm. Are there further comments from the commissioners? Okay, Mr. Sanders, would you like to comment at this time on your letter, which I understand is filed on behalf of Dr. Weller as an abutter?
Yes, if I may just briefly summarize it, Your Honor. Thank you, Chair and Commissioners. We represent, as you know, Dr. Weller, the owner of the property immediately north of the proposed project site. Dr. Weller is also in attendance. As you know, and he's spoken about before, he's extremely concerned about the potential impacts that the extensive armoring of the coastal bank to the south will have on the coastal beach and the coastal bank that are on and protect his property. I have 4 points today summarizing what was in my letter. First point, there is no evidence in the record that we have reviewed affirmatively demonstrating that the project meets the specific performance standard of having no adverse impact to adjacent or nearby coastal banks and other coastal wetland resource area. This information just simply isn't in the record. There are isolated conclusory statements made by the applicants to that effect, but there is no comprehensive expert opinion that speaks to this issue directly or provides a basis for that conclusion. Now, the Superior Court, as I've just said, has instructed the Commission on remand to be specific about what information it needs to evaluate this proposal and why it needs that information. This is just such an issue. You need from the applicant an opinion from a qualified marine geologist or other qualified expert plainly stating that this project will not have a significant adverse impact on nearby coastal wetland resource areas, and stating the basis for that opinion in terms that the merits can be credibly evaluated. Conclusory statements that the applicant has made that merely parrot the regulations are not sufficient. Otherwise, I submit the applicant has simply not met the performance standard of your local regulation. Second point, the record does indeed suggest reason for concern and contain evidence that the project may adversely impact nearby resource areas, most notably in the report of Mr. Berman, in which he warns that the revetment is at risk of causing flanking, exposing more of the adjacent property to more erosion, resulting in the coastline, as we've heard, eroding at differential rates, and generally warning about the dangers of holding the line. But also in the two letters, and now earlier tonight from a statement from the National Seashore, adamantly opposed to this proposal. And I'll speak more about that in a minute. And there are two reports from the Center for Coastal Studies submitted by the applicant that document in general how vital and sensitive this area is, which you already know from your own work. Third, further review is warranted for the potential adverse impacts to adjacent and nearby coastal wetlands resource areas. I submit that a peer review study of the potential adverse impacts to nearby coastal wetlands resource area is sorely needed. The applicant has been candid in saying that this is a novel design and novel approach, an innovative one. You all know better than me how vital and sensitive this area is. Given these two facts, if ever there were an occasion for a peer review study of the potential for adverse impacts, it is this novel project in this sensitive area. Also, given the presence of the property in the National Seashore and DOI's opposition to this project, I submit that further discussion should be had with DOI about the technical basis of their opinions and opposition. I understand from a reviewing of the record that there was some a question about whether the prior letters were based upon qualified experts. I have no doubt that they are, but this, in any event, is an issue that should be addressed and cleared up before you act. Again, the Superior Court has invited you to state with specificity what information you still need. This is another such specific incident. Why does DOI oppose this? Similarly, I understand from the review of the record that there can be a disagreement about whether certain opinions of a Dr. Borelli can be relied upon. That issue, again, falls square within the ambit of the Superior Court's remand. It should be cleared up. Dr. Borelli's opinions about this project should be admitted into the record. And finally, speaking for my own client, Dr. Weller would like the opportunity to present expert testimony concerning the potential impacts to the coastal beach and coastal bank on his property. Finally, again, I reiterate what others have said, and Mr. Wilkinson said, time should be taken to evaluate the emergency measures and soft coyers to determine if they are, in fact, as they now appear to be, a feasible alternative that would preclude this hard revetment. In conclusion, let me say again, this is a novel project in a critical and fragile ecosystem that begs for critical review by multiple qualified experts. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, Mr. Sanders, let me just clarify. You suggest a peer review on the potential for adverse impact based on the revetment?
Yes.
Okay.
If that option is been, I would say that in the interim, time should be given for the soft solution that's been implemented to evaluate it.
Okay. You also suggest specificity regarding the Department of Interior's concerns, the seashore's concerns?
Yes, I understand from a review of the transcript of the prior hearing, or that there was some dispute or some dispute over the basis of, about whether the Department of Interior's and National Seashores opinions were based upon scientific evidence. I think that's I think that's an important issue to clear up.
Okay, and with the letters that and the reports that Ms. McKeon was making reference to, I know you haven't seen them, but if those are related to the subject matter and the reports of experts, is that the type of information you're talking about?
I am.
Okay, and then you're saying that Dr. Borelli should be consulted as a peer review expert or as an individual expert? I'm unclear on that.
I understand from a review that certain opinions of Dr. Borelli's, there was dispute about whether they should be considered evidence that the commission should rely on. Let's get those in a form that they can be relied on, so that there's no question.
Okay, and finally, you said that Dr. Weller wanted to present his own expert testimony as to his concerns about the project's potential impact on his property. What types of expert opinion does he wish to present?
He would be presenting an opinion of a marine biologist or other qualified expert about significant impacts to adjacent nearby coastal resource areas.
Okay. Does anyone else have questions relating to what Mr. Sanders said on the commission? Hillary, I can't hear you, I'm sorry.
Can I ask a question, Debbie?
Of course.
I'm wondering to Amy, can we accept new information at this time?
So the court's decision stated that if there is information missing, that the commission has to adequately describe what that missing information is. So I think that Attorney Sanders is taking that a step further by saying that allowing this information would result in not having, missing information. So there would be no denial based on missing information. That would not be a finding. That was a finding in our last decision, was that there was missing information. There was not enough adequate information. So to overcome that, Attorney Sanders is recommending that information be allowed to overcome that finding that there's missing information. The court, in my opinion, is not entirely clear on what the review entails. There is a line in a decision that states that that the commission has enough information based on the record to make certain determinations, but it's not specifically limited to the information in front of the commission. Further, I would note that the commission is put in a very unusual situation, because even if the court had limited specifically limited the review to the record that was filed with the court, just for information's sake, it should be noted that the plaintiffs in that Superior Court case supplemented the record with information that this commission did not review. But furthermore, the commission is faced with new information right in front of them, meaning this soft solution, which apparently is working. Mr. Wilkinson numerous times has stated that this is working. It's a viable alternative. And that is there, it's on the ground. I just don't know how the commission can ignore that. It's there and it's working. So I don't see how the commission can limit their review to the prior record of proceedings.
Ms. Quessel, do we have the ability at this time to obtain peer review on the potential for adverse impact?
So the commission is allowed to have peer review based on their regulations. The applicant would have to provide the funds for that peer review. I guess I would ask the applicant if they would be willing to provide those funds first before we even go down that road. I will let you know that I had a conversation with, I'm sorry that Attorney Zender is no longer on this. I had a conversation with Attorney Zender at about 12:30 this afternoon, where we decided that that they would present their alternatives analysis, and the commission, would be able to ask questions. I then, a half hour later, received a voicemail.
She's doing exactly what I would do. Say, hey, look, at the conditions have changed, but
is somebody talking?
Go down this road. If we introduce stuff,
me.
then it's all anew. All of what we achieved the first time around.
I don't know who's speaking, Madam Chair.
Sounds like Seth.
Oh, okay. But I was informed that the applicant did not want to present the alternatives at about maybe 1 or 1:30 this afternoon. So, so that is why I think attorneys understated that they would, that Mr. Wilkinson would be on the call, but not present. So, again, I wouldn't go down the road of peer review unless the applicant agreed to it at this point, because if they're not going to fund it, it cannot happen.
Okay. Mr. Wilkinson?
Yes.
Hi. Do you have a position on peer review?
I don't. I would have to circle back with the team before I could give you an answer on that.
Okay. All right.
It does appear, Debbie, that their other attorney is on the line. Perhaps he could weigh in on the peer review, or
I don't think he's involved in this proceeding.
Oh yeah, I can appear for them. I'm happy to chime in.
Okay, and Mr. Moriarty, do you have a position on the peer review?
Yeah, so it's our position that we would object to any supplementation of the record before this commission.
Okay. All right, Mr. Carlson.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to provide clarity on the level of the expert report reports that were provided. The one is by Dr. Rebecca Beavers, who's the foremost coastal geologist in the Park Service. And the other, we retained a coastal engineering firm for that opinion. Just wanted to make that very clear.
Okay. Ms. Wilson? We can't hear you.
A question. Can you hear me? Yes. A question. At the time that the select board drafted and sent that letter, I researched the town's archives because I wanted to find documentation for the reason that the town got rid of those boulders at the town landing, which is just south of this property, literally. It's the next lot. And we had bought the boulders from Eastham and installed them, hoping to protect the parking lot at that town landing. And they were removed, which was a pretty piece of work and expensive because there was heavy scouring on either side. And I went back and I found this and that referring to it. And I want to ask if this is already in the record. Perhaps it's referred to. Okay, that exists. And John Portnoy mentioned it in his long letter that you read at the beginning of the reading into the records. Thank you.
Thanks.
I just wanted to highlight that.
Mr. Miller, did you put your hand up at one point? Did I miss you? No, okay. Was there anyone else? Mr. Sanders, and then Hillary.
Thank you, Chair. With regard to the peer review, again, the Superior Court stated that the commission was to consider what information it needed, what further information it needed with specificity, and why. This is right in that wheelhouse. So if the applicant is taking the position that they won't provide that information, that is a performance standard of the regs. Whether it will have significant adverse impacts, not just on adjacent coastal resource areas, but the gut, the shellfish habitat, all of the resource areas. If you feel like you don't have adequate information, that's a reason that's responsive to the Superior Court.
Hillary?
I guess I'm troubled here because we have information from two different firms. We have, and one individual is pretty renowned in her field of work. And I don't know how we can't take that into our consideration when it's so relevant to what we're looking at. So I guess this question goes to Amy. How do we disregard these documents because they're not in the official record and make any type of decision or determination? And likewise, those two documents that the National Park Service is providing object to the proposal as it stands for good scientific reason. And I guess I'm troubled how we can't use that in our decision-making process tonight and how we're only supposed to be looking at what's in the record.
Thank you, Madam Chair, if I may. So the reason being, well, I guess I'm not going to speak for the applicant, but I'm assuming that the applicant is not going to supplement the record because they feel that the record before the commission is sufficient enough for the commission to make a decision. Now, the commission determined in their last decision that they didn't have sufficient information. The court held that the information that the commission determined was not available was not required. It was not pertinent information, I guess I would say, and that and Attorney Sanders is correct. The court said that if there's any missing information, it needs to be detailed and needs to be listed with specificity. Now, the problem we have is that if the commission is going to look at the record that's before them, you're still going to have information that you're missing. And we can list out all of the information that's missing. It seems to me like we would be back in the same place that we're in. And so, you know, I think that what we have in front of us, furthermore, I'm sorry, I want to backtrack a little bit. The other issue that we have is this is a public hearing, and therefore the information that is being given to us by the abutters, by, you know, the public, even the applicant, they are allowed to present evidence because this is a public hearing. And again, it's the same situation that we have with the soft solution on the ground. I don't know how you can ignore that. I don't know how you can ignore the solution that's on the ground. I don't know how you can ignore Mr. Carlson's, you know, his testimony tonight.
And I guess, you know, through Debbie to Amy, in our original findings, we found that the armoring of the property is likely to lead to significant erosion on abutting properties. The land to the south is a sand dune, which protects Wellfleet Harbor. And the evidence that Mr. Carlson provided furthers that comment by our commission. So I guess it's not as though they're saying something different. They just have a scientific expert furthering our comments.
Correct. And the court, in the three decisions from the court never addressed whether, you know, whether that performance standard was met, whether there was scouring. None of that was ever discussed. And so, you know, that to me means that finding, it's there. The court did not hold that finding to be arbitrary.
Okay, so Ms. Quessel, would it be appropriate for us to say that we still require, in order to make our decision, peer review on the potential for adverse impact on the abutting properties, specific and statement of the Department of Interior's concerns, in that we've received now the 2 letters from the experts and we have the opportunity to review them, those letters, and to allow for further comment on those letters if any is necessary. Further comment from Dr. Borelli in testimony so that we can understand exactly what he was indicating about the subject property and the sand transport at that location, and any expert testimony provided by Dr. Weller on his concerns about damage to his property. We're essentially saying that we need all those particular kinds of testimony and that they are not completely within the record to our satisfaction.
Correct. So that would be in accordance with the court's order that there is information that is missing, and you are listing out that information with specificity. And that would be within the court's decision. In my opinion, that would be within the 4 corners.
I see, Ms. McKeon, you have your hand up. We can't hear you.
I was asked to look at my records of the correspondences. They were not CC'd to the applicant, and I can't tell. Generally, our executive assistant would send along information to applicants. But I guess my concern about this issue of supplemental information is that one of the things that happened when Brian submitted the December 8, 2018 letter is that his expertise was called into question. So the Park Service embarked on getting 2 expert opinions that would be sufficient and additional professional technical analysis, because there was that, you all, many of you heard it, the commissioners that were there at the time. That was definitely a part of the hearing. And so I think that these supplemental reports are very germane. Also, I'm not sure why they wouldn't be in the records that went to the court, because they were available, I think, at the time that they potentially were available when the court filing was filed. I don't know, maybe Amy can tell us, but if they were available in June or July of 19, I don't know, maybe we could find out when the court filing was and why they were then not shared with the court is a concern.
The, if I may, Madam Chair.
Please.
The order of conditions was dated December 21st, 2018.
Oh, okay. So that was what was appealed. Okay. I couldn't remember if it was, because then there was appeal of the MIPA decision and, you know, Mass DEP and whatnot. Okay.
So these were not part of the record and now would be germane to the Department of Interior's position.
Absolutely, because the Department of Interior's position was called into question.
Okay. So they should be included in the record. Mr. Shreve.
Going back to what Barbara said, that if they, as an alternative solution, if they haven't shown that a less intrusive solution is not working, then isn't that reason enough with the information we got that they hadn't done that? They hadn't performed on the need for alternative solutions?
Are there any further comments from the commissioners? Could I, at this point, have a motion indicating whether we want to approve the NOI or not? John?
I propose that a motion that we do not accept their NRI, and instead, for the reasons that they haven't effectively explored alternatives and we have not had chance to thoroughly look at the evidence around the consequence of building this armoring the coast.
Would you also accept that an alternative does exist in the soft solution, which is currently working?
I think they need to seriously explore all the alternatives, and amongst which is the soft alternative that they are presently exercising.
Okay. Is there a second?
I'll second that, Leon.
All right, I need a voice vote. John Kumbler?
Yes.
Barbara Brenessel?
Yes.
Leon?
Yes.
Mike Fisher? Mike?
He may be muted.
Mike,
nope, now he's muted.
Okay, Mike, I need your vote. It looks like he's having trouble. All right, I also vote yes, so we have enough. If we can get Mike's vote, we will. At this point, then I think.
Madam Chair, that to me sounded more like a finding. I didn't hear that the.
Can you hear?
Yes, now.
Yes.
Okay, Ms. Quessel, go ahead, please.
Sure, I'm not sure if I heard whether is the NOI. I think that you asked for a motion to issue an order of conditions.
No.
What was the? I'm confused as to what the motion exactly was.
The motion was to reject the notice of intent.
Okay, thank you.
Is there anything further that we need to do? Hillary?
I'm going to defer to Amy on that.
We will draft a decision, and we will file that. So we can draft that decision and review it at the next meeting.
Okay.
Does that need to be reviewed in executive session, or we can review it in regular?
No, this is a decision based on a public hearing.
Okay.
So it would be like any other order of conditions that you review.
Thank you.
Okay. And we'll go to the next matter, Stillman, 115 Main Street, map 115, parcel 122, a certificate of compliance.
Can we take a quick break, Debbie?
Of course.
Just a couple, 2 minutes.
Sure.
Sorry.
All right, we'll take a recess of 5 minutes.
Hello. Hey, how are you?
My God, figure out your mute button. Jesus.
Hi, Hillary.
Hi.
I'll just wait 1 more minute, Hillary, and then we can start.
Perfect. I just needed to stand up.
So we need to sign two orders of conditions.
Yes, correct. One gets denied, gets the denied, and the other gets approved.
differentiation on the form?
No, but we'll know one is for an approval and one is for a denial.
We can just write it on the top corner.
Yeah, you can put the property or the map and parcel or, you know, whatever you like there.
Okay.
Hillary?
Yes.
Because I voted no on the first one, do I just not sign that?
You can sign it if you like, or you don't have to sign it. It doesn't matter.
Okay. But I signed the second one for sure.
Yes, please.
All right, we're going to come back into session. The matter is Stillman, 115 Main Street, map 115, parcel 122, a certificate of compliance. Hillary, have you been out to the property, you or Doug, to determine?
Yes, we have been out to the property, but this is file number 77-23. So this goes back to 1976.
Oh my God.
So I'm not sure we have a lot to say about work that was undertaken in 1976. But we do have a letter, we do have the order of conditions, and you know, as far as I can tell, it's in compliance.
Okay, is there anyone here on behalf of Stillman?
I have spoken to the attorney for the Stillman property a number of times. It's a Christopher Facette, and there was one condition that said the work shall conform to the building plans, which it had, and that only one dwelling is to be occupied, and that is the case. So,
okay, was there anyone who wanted to comment on this? All right, could I have a motion then to approve Stillman?
So moved, John Kumbler.
Second, Barbara.
I need a voice vote. Barbara?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Leon?
Yes.
Mike? Mike?
Yes.
Oh, good. And Debbie, yes. So that's all set. The next matter is Kavanaugh, 80 Peace Valley Road, map 8, parcel 234, certificate of compliance. Is anyone here for Kavanaugh? Hillary, have you been out to see?
I have been out to that site. Yeah. This is somebody here? No. Okay. Well, this again is another old one. Not quite as old. This one's from 1981. And to the best of my ability, I can confirm that the work was done in compliance with what we have on file, but you know, nothing was glaringly standing out.
Could I have a motion then to issue the certificate of compliance for Kavanaugh?
So moved, John Kumbler.
Is there a second?
Barbara, but I'm really uncomfortable with these. You know, we keep doing this and we have no idea of what was done and if it's in compliance.
And I think that's why we're trying to make that change to our regulation to require them to be issued within
3 years
time. So we're not in this position.
Okay.
Barbara, I agree. I don't know what we can do to correct this.
Right, but I vote yes.
Okay. John Kumbler?
Yes.
Leon?
Yes.
Mike Fisher? Mike? Debbie, yes, that's all set. The next matter, I believe, is Rosenbaum, 100 2nd Avenue, map 40, parcel 136, a notice of intent, construct second floor and reconstruct existing deck, replacement of sand fill on northern side of dwelling. Is anyone here for that?
Yes, Madam Chairperson, this is John O'Reilly. I also believe that Mr. Rosenbaum is on the call as well, Mr. J. Rosenbaum.
I am, yes, thank you.
Thank you. I don't know if the builder, Ocean Edge Custom Homes, David Crosby, is on the line, but he is also part of the team for Mr. Rosenbaum. We have filed a notice of intent to construct a second floor addition onto the existing 3-bedroom home. So the resources associated with this property is, of course, Wellfleet Harbor, coastal beach, land under the ocean, coastal bank, land subject to coastal storm flowage. The controlling resource for this property is the very significant coastal bank that envelops, if you will, the single-family dwelling, which is tucked in the northeast corner of this property. The application, as it states, is to construct a second-story addition onto this home and rebuild the existing deck system around the existing footprint with 2 modifications to that deck system. With regards to the deck system that's at grade, goes around the lower level of the home. We are redecking that surface or redecking as it's needed, but we are proposing to remove 2 small areas of this. One is the area to the north. There's an outdoor wash station and a deck that runs along the northern side of the property. We also have a small corner of the deck that is extended over the existing deck that's extended over the bank. We're simply going to pull that back 5 feet to a 5-foot width so as to get the edge onto the bank, on top of the bank, and not extend over the bank. We, as part of the application, well, that's the at-grade deck. There is a first floor deck, which is 8 feet or so above ground on the west, south, and east sides of this building. We are proposing to reconstruct that deck in the same footprint as it currently exists with no expansion. On the north side of the dwelling, wherein we're removing the deck area, we are proposing to place some fill up against that side of the home. It can be easily delivered to the area with the end of the driveway right off the corner of the filled area. We have shown a limit of work that envelops the work area. And we're also calling for, once the sand is delivered, that area would be planted on a 12 by 12 matrix of American beach grass, as well as extend into 6th Avenue or further north, as it's shown on the plan. We are proposing a wash station on the north side, which will sit on top of the fill, and it will be accessed from the east side or from the 2nd Avenue side. So there'll be a small sandy footpath up through there to the wash station. So that, in a nutshell, is the application. We aren't changing aren't making any modifications to the septic. The bedroom number is staying the same. We are simply adding additional living space to a 2nd-story addition. I'd be happy to answer any questions. The overall proposal does reflect 180 square feet of decking to be removed from the 50-foot buffer, as well as the additional plantings that the American beach grass provides. So at that, Ms. Chairperson, I would be happy to answer any questions.
Leon?
I'm concerned about the effect of this house sits right on the edge of the cliff, and I'm concerned that during construction and the extra weight of that 2nd floor would be very detrimental to this cliff. Also, isn't this all within the 50-foot buffer?
Yes, it is, sir.
Have you done any calculations regarding the impact of increasing the weight of the structure?
I haven't done any calculations that are in any type of report, so we can certainly provide that to you. But the second story addition can be built without any foundation work. So we're not looking to add a foundation. So the existing foundation that there is sufficiently sized for that, to carry that load. So then it's just a matter of looking at how the weight is dissipated from the bottom of the footings down below the house. And I think if I could provide the commission with a very simple section, if that's what they'd like to do, I can show them, I can show you that the bearing footprint of the foundation will not intersect the slope of the bank, which if that were to occur, you would have an issue of stability that you'd need to deal with. If that's of any help to the commission.
Does that answer your question, Mr. Shreves?
Yes. Doesn't our regulation say that we don't allow any changes in the housing or decking within the 50-foot?
No new decks. So if they're rebuilding what's there, they could do that, I guess, but no new structures, including garage, sheds, and decks.
So,
Debbie, can I ask a question, please? It's Michael.
Michael.
I'm sorry, the computer crashed, so now I'm on the phone. So I have a question for Ms. O'Reilly about the fill on the north side, actually a couple of questions. Can you tell us how much fill you're going to put in there?
I believe it's less than 100 yards, but I can certainly calculate that for you, Mr. Fisher.
Okay.
And secondly, what is the purpose of the fill?
The purpose of the fill is to bring the grade up to cover the existing foundation that's there and make the grade a little bit more, have more of a transition through that area.
Okay, I don't believe our regulations allow for fill.
No.
Certainly not in the 50-foot buffer.
Within 100 feet. I'll read Article 3 of our Environmental Protection Bylaw. No person shall remove, fill, dredge, or alter, blah, 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 within 100 feet of the resource areas or land of the ocean or something like that. So it's within 100 feet, there's no fill. I understand this might just be a grading kind of a project, but I'm concerned about the amount of fill that's required here. Is that fill's not going to cover the two windows on that north side, right?
No.
That
is not the intention, but with regards to that Article 3, I'll have to go back and read that again. The way it was just read to me, it says any cutting or filling or alteration within 100 feet. So I think the purpose of the bylaw and the Wetlands Protection Act is to review and control the activity within the 100-foot buffer zone. I don't think and please correct me, I think the regulation, how it was just read, forbids any alteration of any kind within the buffer zone. And I don't believe that's the intent of either the act or the bylaw.
Right, well, it's Article 3 and it just mentions filling, dredging, or altering any wetland, coastal bank, beach dune, or any land within the 100 feet of the foregoing areas.
Hillary?
Are we talking about the grading to the north, the 52 and the 54 elevation line? Is that the area that we're talking about?
I believe so, yes.
And I'm sorry, I missed the purpose of it. What is the purpose of filling that?
The purpose is to bury the north side of the wall. Right now, the foundation's exposed and we'd like to close that in, plus kind of rejoin the topography within 6th Street if you look at the site, there's a little bit of a hollow, so that fill will dissipate that, and again, stabilize the area with the additional plantings. That's the intent.
Madam Chairwoman.
Debbie, may I follow up on that?
Yes, Michael.
So in your proposal on page 1, it says the fill is being proposed to provide a level area and to account for the higher ridge height is the remodeled dwelling. Are you raising it up so that you can legally get it with a higher height? And secondly, the adjusted grade will allow only the first main floor and new second floor to be above the ground. So you're actually talking about burying quite a lot of the house.
Madam Chairman.
I think what they're describing is this trying to eliminate the 3-story issue. It's a zoning matter. The purpose for the grading is a zoning matter.
Madam Chair.
Yes, Mr. Zender, are you involved in this hearing?
I am. I tried to jump in earlier, but I just didn't want to interrupt the flow. The purpose of the grading around the structure is because under the local zoning bylaw, stories are defined in the local zoning bylaw by how much of the basement is exposed, what percentage of the basement is above grade, and what percentage is above a certain height based on the ground level. So by doing a regrading around the base of the structure, it would convert the lowest floor level from a story under the zoning bylaw into a basement. So it's a very common activity in Wellfleet. It doesn't change the ridge height of the structure because the ridge height under zoning is based on the existing grade before you make any disturbances. So it doesn't allow you to go taller with the structure, but it allows you to reclassify the lowest level as a basement, which wouldn't classify as a story, which means you're allowed to have 2 floors of living area above the basement. So it's a zoning, the zoning bylaw is driving this. I will, and I'm more than happy to, when we come back to you, provide, my own thoughts on your regulations and bylaw as to whether or not this activity is permitted in the 50. But I don't want the board to be under any misapprehension as to why this is, or one of the reasons why the grading is being proposed.
Mr. Zender, it does say in your application, and to account for the higher ridge height of the remodeled building.
Yeah, that if Mr. O'Reilly put in the application, that's not true, because under the zoning bylaw, you can't build a higher structure by regrading or changing the natural grade. The ridge height that you're allowed in Wellfleet, that 30-foot maximum that you're allowed, is based on the natural grade of the property before any alterations. So, regrading properties is not a permissible activity for the purposes of creating a higher ridge height. It's only permissible for the purposes of establishing whether or not the lowest level of the house is in fact a basement or in fact a story for zoning purposes. So if that statement's in there, it's an incorrect statement.
Are there other comments from the commissioners?
Yeah, I just have one. I know that the bedrooms are, this isn't ours, it's more a building thing, but it says 3 bedrooms and it will be 3 bedrooms. But I see on the plan that there's going to be a bedroom relocated to the 2nd floor, but then it still shows 3 bedrooms on the footing framing plan. So if you count the bedrooms in the plans, it's 4.
Yeah, Madam Chair.
Yes, Mr. Zender.
And again, I'm not saying anything I think that the members don't already know, but bedroom count is based on the permitted flow of the septic system that's in the ground. And luckily for you, your conservation agent also is your health agent. So she's going to have to review the floor plans to see whether or not it conforms to the health regulations for bedroom count. So, it is what it is, I think, is probably the best way I could put it. So.
Okay. So I think this is going to have to come back to us with some elucidation as to what's going on, because it's pretty confusing right now.
Madam.
Yes, Mr. Zender.
I'm taking notes just to make sure that, when we come back, we address the board's questions or concerns. And as I see, one of the things that the commission, is looking for is a calculation of any effect of the weight of the structure on the stability of the coastal bank, to calculation of fill that is being proposed around the structure. Three, whether or not the nature of this fill is permitted under your local bylaw, your local wetland regulation within the 50.
And when we get into the issue of fill, could you tell us exactly what you're going to use for the fill?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Do we want to talk about beach nourishment? Is there a condition on this property existing for beach nourishment of the rock revetment?
I don't know.
Does the property owner know, or their team?
I do not know. I didn't look at existing beach nourishment requirements. But we can certainly pull the existing orders and read them and synopsize those for the board coming back.
Is there anything else that needs to be addressed before they come back, Mr. Kumbler?
I'm concerned about the redoing of the decks, given our bylaw. To what extent are these just replacing existing decks that are in bad repair, or they affect new decks, and do they violate our no new decks in a 50-foot of the coastal bank?
Madam Chair?
Yes.
We can provide a calculation of the existing decks and a schematic of the location of those decks, and provide information about the proposed to make sure that the proposed decks aren't either increasing or relocating existing decks. We'll look at that.
Okay. Anything else? When would you like to come back?
I think it's up to Mr. O'Reilly as to how fast he thinks he can prepare the additional materials, the calculations.
What you're asking for is should be pretty easy to assimilate. So when would the next meeting be, and the associated filing deadline for supplemental information?
Next meeting is March 3rd, and we need the paperwork 1 week in advance, so that Wednesday by noon.
Previous Wednesday, okay. I'd like to, Ben, unless you see an issue, we need to continue beyond the 3rd. We can try for the 3rd. Submit.
That works well for me, everybody.
Okay, so I need a motion to continue this to the 3rd.
So move, Barbara.
Is there a second?
Second, Michael.
How do you vote, Barbara?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Leon?
Yes.
Michael?
Yes.
And Debbie, yes. You're all set.
Thank you. Good night, everybody.
Thank you.
On March 2nd, was that the date?
March 3rd, I believe.
March 3rd.
Sorry. Thank you very much. All right, the next matter is Miller, 246 King Philip Road, map 34, parcel 12, a notice of intent. Excavate along existing basement, construct a 16 by 14 study, reduce and rebuild existing deck, expand another deck, maintenance on beach boardwalk and stairs. Is anyone here for that?
I'm here, and Steve Phillips is here as well. I'm sorry, I'm Jim Miller, and Stephen Phillips is the
okay.
Steve, do you want to start? Well, okay, I guess I'll start. Basically, the plan is before you. There was an issue, I understand, with respect to the unpermitted trimming of trees. And so I just wanted to apologize and take responsibility. That was, I gave you some correspondence, and I understand as a former lawyer that this impact is impact, and that intention is not necessarily relevant, but there was a misunderstanding with respect to the tree people, and I thought they were doing it, and they said they don't do it until they see the permit in hand. And so I assumed it was done, and for that I apologize, and any remedy that you think is appropriate, I will energetically engage in. I'm happy to do the nourishment and additional plantings. I've owned that house for over 40 years. It's the last remaining original house in that area. And I prize it and would never intentionally, you know, subvert going to you. There's no point. I think the record will show that I've been, I mean, I remember a cold night many years ago, winter night, sitting waiting for a hearing on repairing 3 stairs on the beach to get approval to repair the stairs. So I think the record will show that there's a ample number of times that I've gone to the Concom for appropriate management. And so I apologize. It's my responsibility, and I will do whatever is appropriate to.
Hillary?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, Hillary, what do you recommend?
Well, Mr. Miller did write us
for the unpermitted trimming of trees.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Oh.
I was going to say, Mr. Miller did write us a compelling letter that it was just an oversight. I think we could certainly issue him a non-criminal citation for $200. I don't know when the tree trimming took place. It was in his letter, but I don't know that it's going to serve us well. He understands the regulations now, and he knows what to do should he need to trim a tree. I'm just looking to pull up his letter, but I can't find it at the moment. But I think have all the commissioners seen it?
Yes.
Okay. So I suppose I would recommend a $200 non-criminal citation. And
any mitigation planting?
I don't think it's necessary.
Okay.
Yeah. I would like to do additional planting just in general. So in any event.
Well, you might need a permit for that too.
Right, yeah.
No, I understand it will be part of right. But I understand.
So,
this is Michael.
Yes, Michael.
I'd just like to speak in favor of Hillary's suggestion. The trimming was done, but it was done properly.
For what it's worth.
For what it's worth.
It was unpermitted, but it was proper trimming.
A new variation in the Massachusetts statutes, but done illegally but properly. That would be an interesting.
Okay, so was there anything further on this property that we needed to address besides that, Mr. Miller?
Mr. Phillips. Sorry. Mr. Phillips was going to get back to us with his beach nourishment calculations and beach nourishment materials, which I know he's been working on.
And then there's the application, excuse me, for that extension. I don't know what status that is.
Barbara?
That's what we're considering, I think, right? I have no objections. The only thing I would like to see on the plan is the what we're requiring of everyone, and that's a square foot coverage of disturbance, including walkways, driveways, and those kinds of things within our area of jurisdiction. So within the resource area and 100-foot buffer zone to be on the plan.
Okay. I think we might have lost Steve, but I will.
It looks like we did. So we'll need the information that he agreed to provide Hillary, the beach nourishment information and the amount of beach nourishment.
You want to give him a minute to see if he can join us? I'm wondering if he was having some kind of technical difficulty.
I'll call him.
Steve?
It seems to be a bad night.
Right.
Let me try something else.
Oh, there you go. We can hear you, Steve. Or,
whoops.
We were hearing you.
In the meantime, I don't have the plans in front of me. None of the construction is within the 50-foot buffer zone?
No, it's between the 50 and 100.
Okay, because they're doing a lot of deck work and that would be a problem.
We're actually reducing the size.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Steve Phillips. Okay, I submitted the letter. Maybe it didn't get around. But I did have the beach nourishment figures, and I got with the coastal zone management, and the erosion rate in that area is minus 1.25 feet per year. So I went through the calculations and it came up to 157 cubic yards. I talked to the people who do the neighbors nourishment, Easy Does It. They're familiar with your limitations on the time of year it can be done and the quality of sand. Mr. Miller would be contracting with them directly to do his property. We understand how it's supposed to be placed. Other issues that came up were the repair of the beach stair, which was in Mr. Miller's letter, was explained that it was a handyman thought he was doing something good, you know, didn't realize that replacing some treads on the stairs was an issue. Everybody knows better now. The other issue was the tree trimming, which we just spoke of. Mr. Miller would like to replace the dead pines with some low growing. This is in the buffer zone. Some of the low growing bayberry, beach plum, those types of things. Then we'd like to have a continual vista pruning condition. So no lower than the existing deck was just where it was, which was, as as Mike said, you know, that's where it was pruned before, you know, and that pruning was done in I believe 2019, so a couple years ago now. So welcome to any questions.
Hillary, we don't have a planting plan for this property, do we?
No, I have not seen the planting plan and I have not seen the beach nourishment calculations.
All right, so we would need a planting plan and the beach renourishment calculations to be provided.
Also, I was out yesterday and there was no limit of work marked, but it appears within right next to the deck, there are several trees and a number of bushes, and I wonder if they're going to be replaced as part of the planting plan.
Yes, Mike, those would be replaced. And as I set forth in my letter, and I'm surprised you didn't get it, I emailed it to a number of people. Quote, another question addressing the staking of the work zone. If and when we achieve the commission approval and prior to the start of work, the limit will be staked for review by the commission. That's how we've worked in the past with commission. So hopefully that'll be appropriate and agreeable to you.
Steve, did you submit a new email to us with the beach nourishment calculations?
Oh, yes. I sent that, I believe it was, I'd have to look at I think it was the 11th.
Was it by email?
Yes, it was.
Okay, because I think your email somehow
spam
in our junk file. So I'm wondering if that's where it is and that's why I didn't see it.
I sent it to you, I sent it to Doug, and I sent it to Miss Bates.
It was in my junk mail.
In junk or the other folder? Do you know?
Somebody doesn't like me.
I don't. Chris, was it in junk or other?
I want to say junk, but I'm not sure.
Okay. I'm going there now just to dig it out because if we have the information, I just assume move this along so we don't have to hear it again. But gosh, I have 2,147 pieces of junk.
It was just recently, so it should be on top. Or if you got an alpha, it'll be under Phillips.
I'm
all right. No, I got it right here in junk. In junk, it came on 212. Although I can't open it, of course.
I'm of the opinion that that I would like this project to go ahead and to give it an approval conditioned on this information get to us. I don't think we should stop it on the basis of this.
If that's a motion, I would second it.
That's a motion.
I agree. There are 3 or 4 things that need to be done as conditions, including the square foot coverage of the disturbance, the planting plan, vista pruning plan. I don't know that there is one.
There isn't.
There isn't.
And the issue of the beach renourishment and that calculation.
Right.
Plus the payment of the $200 fine for the unpermitted trimming of trees.
Right.
Hillary, is that too many conditions?
Can you repeat them? Because I was trying to dig out and read the memo, but tell me them again. And I'm
the $200 fine.
Yeah.
For the unpermitted trimming of trees.
Yeah.
The calculation of the beach renourishment.
Yeah.
And some agreement regarding the placement of beach renourishment by the contractor. The planting plan and the vista pruning plan.
And the square foot coverage, I keep coming to that. I have to keep us on track here, get that information on the plan.
Ms. Bensler, Barbara?
Yes.
I submitted that initially with the application, and right here it says the house footprint is 943 square feet. Proposed additional area, including all areas to be vegetated within the work limit, is 2,550 square feet. The additional encompasses only 224 square feet.
All right, I'm not seeing that. But is that work limit or buffer or area?
That was work limit
or
beyond the 50-foot buffer.
Beyond the 50-foot buffer.
Yes.
But I think we want it on the site plan, not in the text.
Right. And also,
okay.
And also it includes the 50-foot buffer, although all you have is a walkway there, but that has to be included.
It was a requirement for the disturbed area, which
in our jurisdiction, which is 50 and 100.
Right, and the disturbed area.
It's not just new disturbed area, it's all disturbed area.
And that was the 2,550 square feet, yes.
Okay.
That was the entire disturbed area, the house, the decks,
okay,
and the work limit.
All right, I just don't see it anywhere, that's all. It should be on the plan. So just type it on the plan.
Okay.
Okay. So I think we're all set. We have a motion. We need a vote. Did we have a second to John's motion? Michael, did you second? Okay, I need a vote. Barbara?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Leon?
Yes.
Mike?
Yes.
And Debbie, yes. You're all set, Mr. Miller.
Supervisor?
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay. And you'll receive my information shortly.
Supervisor?
Okay. And you need to contact the supervisor before any work begins.
Certainly. And that person is?
Who is going to be?
Who is going to be? I'll be the supervisor since I live in the neighborhood. Okay.
Very good. Thank you, Ms. Freeman.
Thanks again.
All right. And the last matter is Shadorowski 77 and 83.
Out of form for that one, guys.
Which form?
Certificate of compliance for
order of conditions.
I mean, I'm sorry. Order of conditions. This meeting is going way too long for me.
You're not alone on that.
Well, maybe you would, never mind.
Order of conditions, thank you.
We have 3 orders of conditions.
Right. God.
All right, and Shadorowski is being continued. That's 77 and 83 Samoset Avenue, map 28, parcels 114 and 113, notice of intent, construct vinyl seawall, and that has been continued until March 3rd. Can I have a motion to continue?
So moved.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, Barbara, how do you vote?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Leon?
Yes.
Mike?
Yes.
And Debbie, yes. So that concludes the agenda. We need a motion to adjourn.
Okay, can someone tell me when this vessel regulation is going to be voted on and posted appropriately? Because I have an AmeriCorps person who's working on educational material, and we can't send out or do anything until we have a regulation.
So I think what may be happening is we may be assembling a task force to try and place these regulations in the most logical place where folks will know where to find them, because I believe many folks don't come looking at the Conservation Commission for small vessel regulations. So I think Selectman Curley has made a proposal to amend some beach regulations as well, that just to try and make things more consistent. And perhaps Ryan, can you weigh in on this task force, or can you let us know where the selectmen are in this process?
We haven't really discussed it as a board yet. I didn't want to create waves until we had a plan. I know that you guys have been the ones that have been looking at the small vessel regs the most extensively, and we definitely need to incorporate. I think that we really do need to incorporate all of our regs in one area for boaters, so that we can be consistent for them, both for town staff and for the general public to be able to easily reference them. So that's my thinking on that for right now. But we have not discussed it as a select board as a whole.
That shouldn't change, though, our current regulation, even if it's incorporated into a larger vessel regulation. If we don't want, if we're saying that people shouldn't store vessels on vegetated areas in our jurisdiction, that's not going to change, even though there's a larger or more, or it's posted someplace else, right?
So there's various parts that could be potential issues with the regulations as they are currently written. I prefer not to get into a conversation as to the specifics on them until we have until we can incorporate your pre-existing regulations into an overall set of regulations governing small boat usage within the town. I don't know. If you want, I can get into the specifics of the issues. But
I mean, I would love to, but I think it's kind of late and people are not wanting to listen to this. But I really wanted to push this forward so we can get something out there before April 1st is when people can start putting their stuff on racks.
So the pre-existing regulations have use of town property with a fee schedule associated with them.
Right.
The Conservation Commission does not have the authority to grant use of town property or fee structure associated with it. The common landings themselves fall within the jurisdiction of the select board or the city council under Chapter 88, Section 19. And section, I think it's 15. The harbor master also has a wide degree of latitude in adopting his regulations to apply to boaters as well. So I'm not even sure if the select board can dictate regulations to a harbor master. I think they're independent under the state or Mass General Law. So yeah, I mean, and from what I can tell, the small vessel program was approved by the select board in 2013. So whatever the language was in 2013 has been approved. It's the fee schedule. I think Suzanne has been including it in her beach fees for the classifications every year. But it is a use of town property fee because you're allowing the storage of vessels on a common landing, and the stickers entitle them to store a vessel at those locations. So I would prefer just to try to roll everything into one. So there's one set of regulations. Right now, I think there's 4 or 5 different places where various people have to look for different regulations regarding boats.
Okay, I'm not going to keep anybody here any longer. I'm giving up right now.
Can we just ask when the selectmen are going to take this up, because it is time sensitive to us, And I suppose we want to be ensured that something will be in place by April 1 with proper notice and information going out to these neighborhood associations surrounding the landings about where the boats can go and where the boats cannot go, so that our resources remain protected.
So the beach department is the body that's been handed off day-to-day use of regulation of the use of the common landings. And so I am proposing an amendment to the beach regulations to preclude the storage of vessels on coastal banks within common landings. For the select board, that's as much as we can regulate. I've asked the state, and they say, and they said that we might not even, I mean, for the storage of vessels, we can regulate that. For the actual, if we were to, let's say, ban boats from a specific landing, that might not be legal according to the state. So, yeah. And they said I should talk to somebody who specializes in water law. I've gone to the town administrator twice to try to get clarity on this, and yeah, we haven't heard anything back, or at least I haven't.
Perhaps town council could weigh in on the legality of where boats can be stored, because we're talking about boat storage, we're not talking about not allowing people to carry their boat to the water and boat away. We're talking about leaving their boat on town land.
Yep. And, you know, we can regulate the storage of vessels. That is within the jurisdiction of the local authorities to regulate that. But yeah, I've asked her to go to town council for this, and I don't know if she has yet or not. So, and that was.
Also, our regulations deal with storage of small vessels on private property.
That would be separate than anything that the town would have any say over. That's entirely within your jurisdiction.
That's the only thing we wanted to vote on. So I don't get it.
You'd have to remove the entire section about stickers, which town landings are acceptable to use them. And yeah.
Okay, but that's still there for now. So I don't see why we couldn't just inform people about, in a very general way, about not putting them on areas within our jurisdiction on vegetated property. Why would that be? Why couldn't we vote on that?
You could vote on that. So
that's what I wanted to vote on.
I really think that for the boaters in general, they need one document that they can refer to.
Great, but it's not here yet. So until we have it, we have 3 or 4 different documents which we can modify or vote on until we pull it all together.
Yep,
but
that sounds fine. So.
And we can also remove a regulation at any time with a public hearing. So it seems logical to keep it until this new regulation comes along and supersedes this current regulation.
Well, yeah, you would still have your regulations governing the use of private property within your buffer zone.
But we would still also have our current regulations are approved to include the town landing. So until something's changed.
Except that, so the regulations have been updated a number of times since 2013. The regulations that were adopted in 2013 are the only applicable regulations that can be applied to common landings, because they are the only ones that have been approved by the regulatory authority over the common landings.
And that's which is
John Cumblish yawning. I think we need to.
That's the under Chapter 88. It's the select board or the city council, and it makes no provisions for any other parties.
So let me ask this, conservation commissioners, do you want to give up on the boat stuff and just let the board of selectmen handle it? I mean, I don't want to be spinning our wheels, wasting our time on something that someone else is working on. We've put a lot of time and effort into this. Why don't we just fork it over to the selectmen if they want to take this, as it's their town landings and they have the authority and we don't? It's one less thing for us to worry about in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah, I'm not concerned about the town landing part. It's the, we're telling people to not put things on the grass if it's on their property, on the vegetation.
So that's what I'm suggesting. Let's get rid of the whole town landing thing and let the Board of Selectmen figure that out with whichever agency they want to work on that with. And we just move forward with the part on private property.
Yeah, that sounds reasonable.
Yeah,
doable.
I would like to I mean, I'll ask the select board. It wouldn't be in time for the next meeting. It would probably be the following one. But to kind of try to make it so that we get all these regulations in one document. Again, it's for the sake of clarity for the general public. You'll get better compliance rather than somebody saying, I didn't know because it was, you know, in different places.
So Barbara, what do you want to do? Do you want to gut what you've prepared and come back to us with a single section?
No, I think, let me share my screen. I think we can make this really simple. Okay. I mean, I don't think we need to if someone else is going to do it, we've spent, you know, an unbelievable amount of time refining this. We had a task force. I am in favor of us just moving forward with the part that's not controversial at the moment. Let the other folks handle it. If they think they can do it, by all means.
Let's just do small vessel storage, 1 in parentheses, 1 and 2, and then just refer people to the small vessel identification and permitting program, and then get rid of everything else.
So we have, I just want to take a look at number 2, but I got pictures in the way. No storage is permitted at town, state, and federal properties on shores of bodies of fresh or salt water, except as at approved locations as designated by the Conservation Commission in cooperation with the harbor master, beach administrator. So perhaps all that gets changed to Board of Selectmen. No storage is permitted at town landings, except at approved locations designated by the Board of Selectmen.
Okay, and that's it.
That's what I would make that suggestion. Ryan, does that work for you?
I don't know, because then you have a select board policy or a select board regulation and conservation regulations.
Okay, I think we're going to have to table this.
Yeah, I do too. Unfortunately, we thought this would be a very simple thing, and it's much more complicated than that.
Can we just have another quick look? What if we got rid of number 2 altogether? On private property, whether residential, commercial, or conservation areas, vessels must be stored outside the 100-foot buffer zone.
That's fine.
Why don't we just leave the rest until it's changed? Because right now, this is the small vessel identification and permitting program. Nothing's changed.
Right.
So why don't we just leave it, and then when it's changed, we change this and get rid of it. But right now, these are regulations that have been voted on. I mean, we can't say Board of Selectmen because we don't know. Ryan isn't giving us information about.
Yeah, I can't speak for the board because we haven't discussed it as a board. I can just.
Can we just vote on this and then change it if things change?
I support that.
Okay, so
that we vote on this now.
To approve the regulation.
I move that we approve this regulation.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Barbara, how do you vote?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Leon?
Yes.
Mike?
Yes.
And Debbie, yes.
Do we want to hear from Miss Rothman, who's been on a while? I don't know what she wants to talk with us about. Miss Rothman?
Hillary?
Yeah.
Hillary,
yeah.
I'm going to be gone for the month of April.
Where are you going?
Visiting my kids. I got my shots. I'll have my shots and I'm going to visit my kids.
Give him a big hug, would you? Miss Rothman, would you like to speak with us? We know you've been on here a while and we're not sure what your matter is. Going once, going twice. Miss Rothman, last chance.
All right, could I have a motion to adjourn, please?
So move.
Second. All right, Barbara.
All right, yes.
John.
Yes.
Leon.
Yes.
Mike.
Yes.
And Debbie, yes.
Thank you, Debbie.
Okay, thanks very much.
Yeah, thank you.
Bye.